Part 1. The Impossible City. Imagine an entire city built by millions of the same man, and every one of them hates the others. They share his face, they share his genius, they share his contempt for everything. And the one thing not a single one of them can stand is being reminded that none of them is the original. Here is what we are doing for the next couple of hours. We are going to walk this entire place from one end of its life to the other, find out why it got built, who was desperate enough to want it, and what it cost to keep a city of millions of geniuses running once it existed. And the cost is so much weirder and darker than you are expecting. We start at the very beginning with the single idea this whole civilization is built on. Then we watch it grow into a full society with cops and schools and factories and a political system. And then we follow it to the end, to the day one kid stood in the middle of it and burned the whole thing to the ground. One thing up front, because it shapes how you watch the rest. By the end of this story, the scariest thing in it will not be Rick. I know that sounds wrong. Rick is the genius, the one who can do anything, the one the whole multiverse is afraid of. You spend the entire show assuming Rick is the most dangerous thing in any room. So you think this story is about how terrifying Rick is. It is not. The scariest thing in this story is the system that Rick built, the thing he made when he was lonely. Hold on to that, because we are going to earn it slowly, piece by piece, and when it lands, it reframes everything you thought this show was about. The first time we see this place, we see it the way Morty does, through the window of a transport with no idea what he is looking at, after a squad of Ricks in matching uniforms arrested our Rick at the family breakfast table. 1 minute, Morty is eating cereal. The next, he is being hauled across dimensions, and the man next to him just tells him flat what it is. He calls it the Citadel of Ricks, then gives the one sentence that explains the entire building. He says it's the secret headquarters for the Council of Ricks. That is from Season 1, Episode 10. And that line is doing a lot of heavy lifting. A headquarters for a council of Ricks, plural. He says it the way you would say it's the DMV. And the casualness is the gag, because what he just described should not be physically possible. This is not a metaphor and not an exaggeration. It is thousands of versions of the exact same person, pulled out of thousands of different realities, all living in one place. Same face, same voice, same drinking problem, same impossible IQ, all crammed into one city, all convinced they are the real one. A homeowners association where every single neighbor is you, and you cannot stand any of them. And the reason they came together, in Rick's own words, is the part I cannot get over. He explains that he has enemies, a lot of them. He name drops Season 1, Episode 10, galactic terrorists, a few subgalactic dictators, most of the entire intergalactic government. When you are smart enough to threaten reality itself, reality starts hunting you back. And a few thousand versions of him on a few thousand timelines all had that same problem at the same time. So what did all those geniuses do? Rick says they had his words, the ingenious idea of banding together like a herd of cattle or a school of fish. Season 1, Episode 10. The smartest man in the universe is describing his own civilization as livestock, prey animals huddling up because there is safety in numbers. He is not wrong, by the way. That is the joke and the tragedy, and we are going to watch it play out the whole video. For now, hold the image. The Citadel is a herd. It was built out of fear. The smartest man in the universe looked at his own people and went with farm animals. And the streets are a lot to take in, because it is not just Ricks in lab coats. There are cowboy versions. There are Ricks running carnival booths. Every face is a remix of the same face. Rick sums up the whole vibe in one line as he walks Morty through it. He calls it a real who's who of Who's You and Me, Season 1, Episode 10. A perfect way to describe a city where the entire population is one guy doing impressions of himself. But here is the thing that tells you everything about our specific Rick. He hates it here. He looks at this monument to safety, this whole civilization of himself, and he is not impressed. He is embarrassed. His exact words of Season 1, Episode 10 are, "Not my cup of tea, this place. I say the point of being a Rick is being a Rick." and that sentence echoes through the entire story. The point of being a Rick is being a Rick, singular, one of a kind, the exact thing this city, by existing, makes impossible. Our Rick, the one this show follows, is not a member of this thing. He never joined, and the show makes a point of it. He even calls the place their stupid clubhouse before he has fully arrived. Like a man dragged to a party, he RSVP'd no to. And when the council's enforcers arrest him, one of them throws his non-membership right back in his face. The line is, you lost the right to have a say in these things when you refused to join the council. Season 1, Episode 10. So our guy is the odd one out. He is officially, in the show's own labeling, Earth Rick C137. That is his designation. His dimension number, the thing that tells thousands of identical men apart. And out of all those versions of himself, he is the one who looked at the clubhouse, looked at the safety it offered, and walked away. And the reason he gives is the whole thesis of this video in one breath. Standing in a room full of himself, accused of murder, he turns to all of them and says, "I'm the Rick, and so were the rest of you before you formed this stupid alliance." Season 1, Episode 10. Every being in that room believes he is the one true Rick, the smartest man in his own universe, the final boss of his own reality. And our Rick just told them they gave that up the second they signed the membership form. He is not pleading innocent to a murder charge. He is telling a room full of himself that they are forgeries, that joining the group is the thing that made them fake. To a Rick, there is no deeper insult in existence. Picture a million geniuses agreeing on exactly one thing, that the other guy is the fake. And the show actually sides with him on the framing, at least a little. The charge against him is not random. A council Rick lays out exactly why they grabbed our guy first, and the reason is pure character assassination. The line, Season 1, Episode 10, is that out of all the Ricks in the central finite curve, you're the malcontent, the rogue. Even the bureaucracy admits it. Our Rick is the troublemaker, the one who does not fit, the one who would say something like what he says next. And he is not done. The council's whole reason for existing is safety. They banded together to protect themselves from the galactic government, from the people hunting Ricks across the multiverse. So Rick takes their entire founding logic and turns it into an insult. He tells them, you wanted to be safe from the government, so you became a stupid government. That makes every Rick here less Rick than me. Season 1, Episode 10. That is the thesis in 2 sentences. To Rick, the moment you form a government, even one made entirely of yourself, you have admitted you are scared. And to a Rick, being scared is the least Rick thing you can be. They built a city to feel safe. He is telling them the city is not their fortress, it is their confession. Physical proof, the size of a planet, that they got scared and gave up the one thing that made them special. His logic is airtight, which is somehow the most insufferable thing about it. And the kicker is, the room cannot stand him for it. They have no comeback because deep down, every Rick in that chamber suspects he is right, and there is nothing a Rick hates more than another Rick being right. So they do the only thing a scared bureaucracy ever does. They charge the guy who pointed it out. He is the malcontent, the rogue, the one Rick who looked at the safest structure in the multiverse and called it cowardice to its face. Turns out the one crime a society of geniuses cannot forgive is being told the truth about itself. And that exact contempt is the crack the entire rest of this story grows out of. Rick is the one who got away. He said no, he kept his independence, and on some level, the Citadel never forgives him for it. Everything that goes wrong in this city, every dark thing we are about to uncover, traces back to the root our Rick named out loud in that chamber. A bunch of scared geniuses who wanted to feel safe and built a monster to do it. And before we go deeper, file away 3 things. We are not going to explain them yet because the payoffs only hit if you walk into them cold. We are just planting them, 3 seeds, and everyone grows into something you will not see coming. Number 1, the Mortys. You have already seen them. Every Rick comes paired with a little anxious kid, a grandson, the nervous one who stammers. And in this city, there are millions of those kids too. So here is the question I want lodged in your brain. Why? A city of geniuses, the smartest beings in all of infinity, beings who can build portals between realities and topple galactic empires, somehow needs an entire underclass of small scared children just to function. Why would a civilization of gods need a permanent servant class made of 12-year-olds? There is an answer. It is one of the bleakest things this show has ever put on screen. And once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. But not yet. The Mortys are not what you think they are. Number 2, the election. There is going to come a day deep into this story when this city sits down and holds a vote, a real one, with candidates and debates and campaign managers and polls. And I need you to picture who is voting. This is a collection of men who each genuinely believe they are the rightful king of reality. Everyone thinks he is the smartest being who has ever existed, and they are going to try to agree on a single leader. A democracy made of people who all believe they are the only one who should ever be in charge of anything. I will let you sit with that. What could possibly go wrong? The answer is more than you think, and in a way, nobody in that city sees coming until it is far too late. And number 3, this is the big one, the central finite curve. You already heard the phrase a few minutes ago tucked into that murder charge when the council called our Rick the Rogue out of all the Ricks in the central finite curve. Most people skate right past it. Do not, because there is a wall around this entire story, an actual wall built around infinity itself, and everything you are about to watch, the whole rise and fall of this city, happens inside it. Nobody in the Citadel really talks about it for a very long time. They live their whole lives inside this wall without ever mentioning it, and then one person finally says out loud what it is and why it was built, and the entire show changes shape underneath you. There is a reason this story is still talked about today, and that wall is most of the reason. The Mortys, the election, the wall around infinity, 3 loose threads. Keep your hand on all 3, because before we are done, we are going to pull every one of them, and they are all going to turn out to be the same thread. So how does something this insane even get built? Sit with the contradiction, because it really is one. You have one lonely old man who thinks a government is for cowards, who sees safety itself as weakness, who walked away from the one place that could protect him. And that exact personality, multiplied a few thousand times, ends up building a metropolis. Millions of him, living shoulder to shoulder. People who agree on nothing manage to agree on this one thing. How? To answer that, we go back before the council, before the trial, before the murders, before any of the chaos you just got a taste of, back to the single idea this entire civilization is sitting on top of, the foundation underneath the foundation. And the strange part is, almost nobody inside the city even knows it is there. They walk on it every day. They were born inside it. And they never once look down. Because the Citadel is not really a city. It is the answer to a question. A question only Rick would ever be lonely enough and arrogant enough to ask. And to understand the answer, we have to talk about the wall around infinity and the terrible thing it was built to protect. Part 2, the wall around infinity. So let's answer it. Why does a man who hates everyone build a town? That contradiction sits underneath this whole place, and it does not resolve the way you would expect. The instinct is to say fear, and we covered that. Fear is the surface answer. The whole answer is lonelier and stranger, and once you see it, you cannot unsee the entire show through it. Here's the thing about being the smartest being in your universe. At some point, you run out of things to be smarter than. You beat the government. You beat death. You beat physics. You beat God more than once, and you got bored doing it. And when there is genuinely nothing left in your entire reality that can challenge you, you are not powerful anymore. You are just alone, completely, cosmically alone, the only one of your kind in an infinite ocean of idiots. And that is the loneliness that builds a city. Not the fear of dying, the fear of being the only one. Because there is exactly one being in all of existence who could ever understand a Rick, who could ever be on his level, who could ever look him in the eye as an equal. and that being is another Rick. So the most isolated man in any universe finally found the one companion who would not bore him to death, himself. A few thousand copies of himself. The cure for being too smart turned out to be the one guy just as insufferable. And feel how specific that loneliness is, because it is not the normal kind. Normal loneliness you can fix. You go find people, the multiverse is crawling with them. Rick's problem is that none of them count. To him, talking to a regular person is like a chess grandmaster trying to have a satisfying game against a toddler who keeps eating the pieces. He is not lonely because there is nobody around. He is lonely because there is nobody who can keep up. And only one kind of being in all of creation could ever clear that bar. The exact same impossible mind, grown in a different reality. That is the engine under the whole thing. The Citadel is what happens when the loneliest possible person discovers there are infinite other versions of the only person he has ever respected. And so they pooled. Thousands, then millions, drawn together out of every timeline where they existed into one shared address. Our Rick frames that pooling as fear, as livestock huddling up, and he is right about that too. But underneath the herd of cattle insult, there is something almost tender. These are beings who built an entire metropolis just so they would not have to be alone with how smart they are. And here is the part that makes it tragic instead of just sad. It does not work. It was never going to work. You take the loneliest man in existence, give him the perfect companion, the only mind that could ever match his, and then give him 1,000,000 of them. And what does he find? 1,000,000 other men exactly as arrogant as he is, exactly as contemptuous, exactly as certain that they and only they are the real one. He went looking for the one being who could understand him, found 1,000,000 who understand him perfectly, and that turns out to be the problem. Because what a Rick understands better than anyone is how to be unbearable. The thing that made him too smart for company also made him too proud for it. So the cure and the disease showed up in the same body, 1,000,000 times over, and moved into the same city. And the way Rick describes that pooling is the line we touched on last section, but put it back under the microscope now, because in this context, it lands completely differently. He tells Morty that a lot of versions of him across a lot of timelines all had the same enemies and the same problem. Then he describes the solution. His exact words, Season 1, Episode 10, are that a few thousand versions of him had the ingenious idea of banding together like a herd of cattle or a school of fish or those people who answer questions on Yahoo Answers. And I have to stop on that third one because it is doing something sneaky. Cattle and fish are about safety in numbers, prey animals surviving by clumping up. But Yahoo Answers, that is something else entirely, because what is a question and answer forum? A bunch of strangers who each think they are the smartest person in the thread, all talking over each other, all certain everyone else is wrong. That is not a survival instinct. That is an ego pile, and Rick deliberately slips it into the same breath as the prey animals, like he is telling you the truth about the Citadel sideways. It is a herd, yes, but it is also a comment section. Millions of the same arrogant man, all convinced they are the one with the right answer, somehow agreeing to share a server. A civilization with the survival logic of cattle and the social skills of an internet argument. And the scale of it should genuinely make your head hurt. Rick says it plainly. Most timelines have a Rick, Season 1, Episode 10. Sit with the math. Not some timelines, not a lot of timelines, most of them. Across the multiverse, the default outcome of a reality is that it produces a Rick. He is not a freak accident. He is a recurring feature of existence, a thing the universe keeps making over and over, and the Citadel is just the place where a slice of all those copies finally found each other and moved in together. But most timelines have a Rick is not the whole picture. Most is not all. And buried inside that murder trial we walked through last section, there is a phrase that quietly tells you the Citadel is not drawing from everywhere. It is drawing from a very specific, very deliberately fenced-off slice of infinity. You probably skated right past it because the show wanted you to. It drops it like it is nothing. When the council explains why they hauled our Rick in first, why he fits the profile of a Rick killer, a council Rick says, "Of all the Ricks in the central finite curve, you're the malcontent, the rogue." Season 1, Episode 10. And that is it. That is the entire introduction the phrase gets. The central finite curve. No definition, no diagram, no explanation. It is said the way a cop would say, "out of everyone in this precinct," like it is just the obvious name for the obvious group. And then the scene moves on and forgets it for years. But look at what that sentence quietly admits. Of all the Ricks in the central finite curve. Not all the Ricks. Not every Rick in infinity, the Ricks in the curve, which means there is an inside and an outside. There is a boundary, a fence around which Ricks belong here and which do not. The council is not the government of every Rick who ever existed. It is the government of the Ricks inside one specific shape, one bounded set, carved out of an infinite supply. They named the most exclusive club in existence and mentioned it once like a local zip code. And notice the words they chose because the show is not being lazy. Finite. They built a finite thing. But everything we know about this universe is infinite. Infinite realities, infinite Ricks, infinite everything. So the phrase itself is a contradiction sitting right there in the dialogue. A finite curve in an infinite multiverse. Those two words should not be able to share a sentence. And the fact that they do, that someone carved a finite countable shape out of something with no end, is the single strangest engineering feat in the entire show. Bigger than the portal gun, bigger than cheating death. Somebody took infinity and gave it an edge. And this is the seed of the entire video, so hold it. There are infinite universes. The show has shown us that 100 times. Infinite realities, infinite outcomes, infinite versions of everyone. But the Citadel does not pull from all of them. It pulls from a curve, a finite, bounded, hand-selected slice cut out of something infinite. And nobody in this trial stops to ask the obvious question. Who decided where to draw that line and what got left on the other side of it? And now, I told you last section I was going to make you wait for the payoffs, and I meant it. So I'm not going to tell you who eventually explains this or when or what it costs them to say it. That is for much later. But the show does eventually explain it in plain language, and the explanation is so clean and so brutal that you deserve to have the concept in your hand now, even without the context around it. Because once you understand the shape of the curve, every single thing in this story starts pointing at it. The way it eventually gets put in Season 5, Episode 10 is this. They built a wall around infinity. That is the whole concept in 5 words. You cannot wall off infinity. Infinity has no edges to build against. And yet that is exactly what was done. Someone took the infinite and drew a line through it and said, this part, only this part, is ours. And the line they drew reframes the entire show. The same explanation Season 5, Episode 10 continues. They separated all the infinite universes from all the infinite universes where he's the smartest man in the universe. Read that slowly because it is doing surgery on the premise of the whole series. There are infinite universes. In most of them, Rick is the smartest thing alive, but not in all of them. In some of them, somewhere out past the wall, there's a universe where Rick is the second smartest, or the 10th, or just some guy. Universes where Rick walks into a room and is not the most dangerous mind in it. And the curve walls every one of those off. The Citadel draws only from the slice where Rick wins, where Rick is God, where Rick is, without exception, the apex of his reality. Every Rick you will ever meet in this story comes from inside that wall, which means every Rick you will ever meet has lived his entire life as the smartest being he has ever encountered. They are not just a population of geniuses, they are a population filtered down to only the universes where the genius is never beaten. And there is one more piece of that explanation, the cruelest piece, the one that turns the whole curve from a cool sci-fi concept into the engine of a tragedy. Take what we just said to its logical end, and you get a horrifying picture, a civilization where every single citizen, without one exception, has lived his entire life as the smartest being he has ever met. A whole society where literally everyone is the apex, where nobody anywhere has ever once been humbled by meeting something greater than himself. The show has a metaphor for that, and it is savage. The same explanation, Season 5, Episode 10, lands on this image. The Ricks built one infinite crib built around an infinite baby. A crib around a baby. That is what the wall actually is. Not a fortress protecting brilliant men from a hostile multiverse. A nursery. The universe-sized equivalent of a parent who curated their child's entire world so the kid would never, ever lose, never face anything bigger than himself, never have to grow up. A wall around infinity so that the smartest man alive would never once have to feel small. And once that image is in your head, it never leaves because it explains the way every Rick carries himself. Every single one of these men grew up in a reality engineered so he would always win. Not by luck, by design. The wall guaranteed it. So of course they all walk around like the universe owes them something. Of course, none of them can take being told they are wrong. They were raised, all of them, in the one corner of infinity where they could never lose, and now they are shocked, genuinely shocked, every time another version of themselves refuses to kneel. They were built to be the center of everything, then crammed into a city full of other people who were also built to be the center of everything. So that is the contradiction this whole city is built on top of, and it is the thing the rest of this video is going to watch tear itself apart. A wall around infinity, raised so the smartest man alive would never have to feel small. A herd of gods, everyone certain he is the only real one, the cure for Rick's loneliness and the source of all his contempt, poured into the same body a million times over and handed a shared address. It was always going to come apart. The only real questions were how and how slowly and who would be left standing in the rubble when it finally did. For 2 whole sections now, we have talked about this place from the outside, as an idea, as a wall, as a contradiction. But the show does not leave it abstract for long. The first time we are actually taken inside the Citadel, we go in the way Morty does, hauled there against his will, blinking up at a city built entirely out of his own grandfather. That is Season 1, Episode 10. That is where the curtain finally lifts. So let's go to the day the audience first walked through the gates and met the council face to face and started to understand exactly what these millions of kings had decided to do about the fact that none of them would ever bow. Part 3, the Council of Ricks. The Smith kitchen, an ordinary morning. Beth and Jerry bicker about nothing. Summer is on her phone. Morty eats cereal. And Rick radiates contempt at the eggs. And then the wall opens. A squad of Ricks in matching galactic uniforms comes through a portal into the middle of the most boring scene on the show. And the boring scene is over. One of them reads the warrant out loud, and it is the first time we hear how this place talks about itself. Rick Sanchez of Earth Dimension C137, you are under arrest for crimes against alternate Ricks by the authority of the Trans-Dimensional Council of Ricks. Season 1, Episode 10. Sit with that. A man is being arrested by the police, and the police are him, the warrant, the badge, the crime. All of it is Rick. He is being read his rights by his own face. And then comes the line that tells you exactly where Jerry sits in this universe. He half stands to object, to do the dad thing, and one of the uniformed Ricks does not even look at him. He just says, neutralize the Jerry. Season 1, Episode 10. They say neutralize the Jerry like he is a model of appliance they have handled many times before. That is the whole social order of the multiverse in 3 words. Not a name, a category. There is the Rick, the Morty, and the Jerry. And the Jerry is a thing you neutralize on your way to the people who matter. The squad freezes him solid and steps right over him because to the Citadel, Jerry is not a person caught in a raid. He is furniture standing in the path, and not one Rick in that uniform thinks twice about it. So they grab Rick, grab Morty as a witness, and haul both through to the place we have spent 2 whole sections circling without ever entering. Now the door is finally open. Morty steps out, and his face does the work the score does not have to, because what he is looking at is a real functioning city full of nothing but his grandfather. Rick, dragged along in cuffs, narrates with the boredom of a man being processed at the DMV. Morty asks what this place is, and Rick tells him flat, the Citadel of Ricks. And then, it's the secret headquarters for the Council of Ricks. Season 1, Episode 10. That is the reveal the whole cold open promised, and the show throws it away in 2 tossed-off lines, because to Rick, it is not a wonder, it is paperwork. And then Rick gives the line that is basically the thesis of this entire location. Looking out at the crowd of himself, he says, this place is a real who's who of who's you and me. Season 1, Episode 10. A who's who of who's you and me. It is a celebrity gallery where every celebrity is the same 2 people, and in every case, the most important and least important person in the room is a Rick and a Morty. And you can watch Morty try to make it mean something, wanting it to be cool, wanting to feel special inside a crowd of his own grandpa. But Rick has no interest in letting the moment be magic. To him, this whole place is a tourist trap built by cowards, and he says so. Not my cup of tea, this place. I say the point of being a Rick is being a Rick. Season 1, Episode 10. That line is doing more than landing a quip. It is the first time we hear the belief the entire Citadel is a betrayal of. Here's the thing the show plants right here and lets you walk past. Our Rick is not a member of this place. He never signed up. The reason they have to drag him in through a portal instead of summoning him is that he is an outsider to the one institution built entirely out of him. When a guard pushes back on his complaining, the line clarifies the whole relationship. You lost the right to have a say in these things when you refused to join the council. Season 1, Episode 10. He refused to join the council. Think about that against everything we built in the last 2 sections. A few thousand versions of this man pooled together, terrified and lonely, and built a government to keep themselves safe. And C-137 looked at the one club in all of existence designed precisely for someone exactly like him and said no. He would rather be hunted on his own than be a citizen of a city full of himself. That refusal is the engine of his contempt. He is not sneering because he thinks he is too cool for the place. He is sneering because to him it is the single most pathetic thing a Rick can do. The point of being a Rick is being a Rick, singular, sovereign, beholden to nobody, including the other versions of your own face. The moment a Rick takes a vote, agrees to be bound by a rule, he has, in C-137's eyes, stopped being the thing the council was named after. He skipped the support group for people exactly like him because needing one made you less like him, and the Citadel feels the same way about him from the other side. To them, C-137 is not a free spirit, he is a deadbeat. The one who would not chip in, would not stand for the anthem, would not pay his dues, and now has the nerve to walk their halls unimpressed. So when bodies start turning up, you can already feel which Rick they are going to want it to be. The one who told them the whole thing was beneath him. The one who refused to join. And something has gone very wrong. They march Rick into the chamber, and the holograms light up with the reason. Ricks are dying. 27 Ricks brutally murdered in their own timelines. An unprecedented Rick-acidal epidemic. What say you, Earth Rick C-137? Season 1, Episode 10. 27 dead in their own realities, in the one place a Rick is supposed to be untouchable, the universe where he is the smartest thing alive, and the case against our Rick is not evidence. Not at first. At first, it is just vibes. They pulled him in before anyone else, and when he asks why, the answer is almost honest about how flimsy it is. He says, "Why am I the first Rick you pull in every time a Rick stubs his toe?" And the council's answer, "You have a history of non-cooperation with the council." Season 1, Episode 10. The evidence against him was, in full, that he had previously been annoying. And then they say the quiet part that ties this trial back to everything we have built. They tell him exactly why he fits. You fit the profile of all the Ricks in the central finite curve. You're the malcontent, the rogue. Season 1, Episode 10. There it is again. The central finite curve, the phrase we spent half of last section pulling apart, dropped a second time just as casually like the name of a county. Of all the Ricks inside that walled-off slice of infinity, this one is the troublemaker. And notice what they are actually telling you. They are not accusing him because the facts point at him. They are accusing him because his personality offends the institution. In a city of millions of the same man, the council has decided the one who refused to fall in line is the one most likely to start killing. The crime they are really prosecuting is not murder, not yet. It is nonconformity. And in a society made entirely of one stubborn man, nonconformity is the only sin everybody can agree to punish. So Rick stops defending himself because defending yourself implies the court has standing, and he does not believe it does. Instead, he goes for the throat of the institution. And what comes out is the single most important thing anyone says about the Citadel in the whole series. He looks at a room full of himself and says, "I'm the Rick, and so were the rest of you before you formed this stupid alliance." Season 1, Episode 10. I need to be precise here because this line gets misremembered constantly. Rick is not saying the show has proven he is the one original Rick all the others spun off from. The show never proves that. He is making a claim, his opinion stated as fact in a courtroom, and the claim is about what being a Rick means. To him, every one of them was the Rick, fully and sovereignly, right up until the day they signed that sovereignty away to build a government. And then he twists the knife with the part that stings, because from his point of view, it is airtight. You wanted to be safe from the government, so you became a stupid government. That makes every Rick here less Rick than me. Season 1, Episode 10. That is the whole indictment delivered by the one man who refused to live in it. You built a government to escape a government. You took the most independent being in existence and made him fill out forms. Every vote, every rule, every dues payment was a tiny surrender of the exact thing that made you a Rick. His closing argument was that the whole jury was a worse version of him for needing a jury, and he punctuates it because, of course he does, with a little wave at the offended crowd. Yeah, murmur it up, D-bags. Season 1, Episode 10. He is on trial for 27 murders, surrounded by a government that wants him gone, and his strategy is to insult all of them for being insufficiently like him. That is not a defense. That is a man who would rather be convicted than concede that joining the council was reasonable, and the council naturally decides to convict, because then they do find evidence, or what looks like it, a council Rick calls for it. Evidence. Good idea. Scan his portal gun. And the scan comes back damning. Yes, but it appears you alone have been going to the exact timelines and locations in which the murders occurred. Season 1, Episode 10. His own device places him at all 27 scenes. As far as the council is concerned, the malcontent just got caught red-handed. Rick, for once, is rattled because he knows he did not do it. What? That's ridiculous. I'm obviously being set up. Season 1, Episode 10. Hold on to that because he happens to be right, and the way he is right is the entire engine of this episode. But the council is not in a listening mood. They have a profile, a body count, and now a portal gun that agrees with them. So they pass sentence. And the sentence is pure Rick and Morty, horrifying and stupid in exactly equal measure. Earth Rick C-137, the Council of Ricks sentences you to the machine of unspeakable doom, which swaps your conscious and unconscious minds, rendering your fantasies pointless while everything you've known becomes impossible to grasp. Season 1, Episode 10. A government of the smartest beings in existence, and the worst punishment they could invent is aggressive confusion. But Rick is C-137, the rogue, the one who refused to join, and a man like that does not sit politely in the machine of unspeakable doom. He grabs Morty and runs, and as he runs, he lays out the only logic that matters now. He did not do it, but that no longer fixes anything because the council is convinced. But someone out there is killing Ricks, and the council ain't going to stop thinking it's me until we clear our names by finding the real Rick killer. Season 1, Episode 10. So now there is a real killer loose in the Citadel, picking off the smartest beings in existence one timeline at a time, and the only Rick willing to hunt him is the one Rick the whole government has framed. That is the case Rick takes. Clear his name by finding the thing that is actually murdering his own face across the multiverse. And here is what nobody in that chamber thought to ask. This decision seemed small. It wasn't. Because to catch the killer, Rick has to follow the bodies. And the bodies lead him to a horror that has nothing to do with the Ricks at all. Because every Rick the killer touched had something in common, something we have been circling since the first frame of this video. Every one of them dragged a grandson around. And the reason the killer needed a whole building full of them, strapped to a wall, screaming, is the most disturbing thing the Citadel has shown us yet. The Mortys were never just sidekicks. They were the infrastructure. And we are about to find out exactly what this civilization of geniuses does to the children it runs on. Part 4, the underclass. So the Mortys were never just sidekicks. They were the infrastructure. And to see what that means, go back a few minutes in the episode to a quiet exchange that plays like a throwaway and turns out to be the foundation the whole civilization stands on. Because Morty does the thing Morty always does. He looks at all these Ricks with all these Mortys and wants to believe that he and his Rick have something the others do not. And Rick puts that hope down like a sick animal. 2 words, you're a camouflage. Season 1, Episode 10, not a partner, not a grandson in this moment, a camouflage. And then he explains the mechanism, and it is so clean and so cold that it reframes every Rick and Morty pairing you have ever watched. Ricks have a very distinctive and traceable brainwave due to our genius. Season 1, Episode 10. That is the problem every Rick shares. Being the smartest thing in your universe is dangerous not just for what you do with it, but because it is loud. Genius in this show's logic has a frequency, and anyone hunting Ricks can tune to it. A Rick standing alone is a beacon, screaming his location to every bureaucrat and bounty hunter who knows what to listen for. And that is beautifully cruel writing because it turns the thing every Rick is proudest of into the thing that gets him killed. The intelligence is not just a gift, it is a leash. The smarter you are, the brighter you burn, and the harder you are to hide. A Rick can no more turn his genius down than a lighthouse can decide to be subtle. So the universe of Ricks has a problem with no internal solution, and the only fix comes from someone who is the opposite of a genius. Being the smartest man alive comes with one design flaw, which is that you show up on radar. And here is the fix. The best way to hide from an enemy's radar is to stand near someone with complementary brain waves that make ours invisible. Season 1, Episode 10. Then the punchline that is also the thesis. See, when a Rick is with a Morty, the genius waves get canceled out by the Morty waves. Season 1, Episode 10. The 2 signals meet in the middle and flatten into nothing. A Rick beside a Morty does not read as a genius. He reads as background noise. The grandson is not company. He is the off switch on the grandfather's distress signal. The smartest being in the universe hides by standing next to the dumbest version of his own bloodline. And notice that Rick says Morty waves like an established unit of measurement, like ohms or decibels. He does not invent it on the spot. He explains it like a fact every Rick already knows, which means somewhere in the Citadel this is settled science. There are textbooks, there are charts, a civilization of the smartest beings alive, quantified exactly how much stupidity it takes to hide a genius, and then built a supply chain around producing that stupidity on demand. And you can watch the exact moment it lands on Morty, because the show makes you watch. He gropes for an out. The soft version where maybe it is about chemistry. Because our personalities are so different. Season 1, Episode 10. And the answer is no. It was never about personalities. It is physics, and Morty is a component in it. So Morty says the quiet thing out loud himself, and this is what matters because it means the kid understands his own role perfectly. I mean, isn't that what Mortys are? Human cloaking devices? Season 1, Episode 10. He is not confused. He gets it completely. And the horror is not that Morty does not understand. The horror is that he does, has understood it for a while, and is only now saying it to the man's face, hoping to be told he is wrong. He is not told he is wrong. Rick doubles down in one of the bleaker things he ever says to Morty, dressed up as a compliment. You're a perfect, impenetrable suit of human armor, Morty, because you're as dumb as I am smart, which is why when I say shut up, it's really good advice. Season 1, Episode 10. Read what that actually says. The thing that makes Morty useful as armor is the thing Rick insults him for. His ordinariness is the whole point. A smarter Morty would have a louder brainwave and cancel nothing out. Morty works precisely because he is not a genius. He was selected as a human shield for being exactly average. The job requirement for protecting the smartest man alive is being unremarkable enough to erase him. And Morty does protest. He plants his feet for 1 second and says the thing every viewer wants him to say. I'm more than a human shield. Season 1, Episode 10. And the tragedy is that the show, the system, and the Citadel will spend the next several seasons answering it. Is he, though? Because the entire city we are touring is built on the assumption that the answer is no. Go back to the crowd from the last section, the carnival, and look at it again with this in your head. Every Rick walking around free is free because a Morty somewhere is canceling his signal. The Mortys you read as grandsons, as company, as the cute half of a buddy cartoon are antennae. The Citadel did not stumble into needing them. It industrialized them. They do not find Mortys in the multiverse and recruit them. They make them by the millions on purpose to one specification. A complementary brainwave, mass-produced, so the genius can keep hiding behind the child. And once you see the pairing as a circuit instead of a relationship, you cannot unsee it for the rest of the series. So Rick chases the bodies, 27 dead Ricks, and the trail leads off the grid, away from the carnival, to a structure built by a Rick who wanted to disappear so completely that even other Ricks could not find him. And how he pulled that off is bolted to the outside of his building. Rick and Morty get close, and Morty sees figures on the exterior and reacts the way a person reacts to people in distress. And Rick corrects him. Not people, Morty, Mortys. Season 1, Episode 10. I am going to slow down here because this is the floor of the whole story, the lowest the show is willing to go, and it does not flinch. There is no joke coming for the next stretch. There should not be. What is on that building is a grid of Mortys strapped down, kept alive, and held in pain on purpose. Rick explains why, and the explanation is the engineering spec for an atrocity. Well, one Morty's enough to hide from the bureaucrats, but you get a whole matrix of Mortys and put them in agonizing pain. That creates a pattern that can hide even from other Ricks. Season 1, Episode 10. Follow the logic the way the killer did. One Morty cancels a Rick's signal, enough to fool the government. But a Rick hiding from other Ricks, the smartest hunters there are, needs a denser signal. And you make the signal denser with volume and suffering. A whole matrix of children in agonizing pain produces a camouflage so total the cleverest beings in existence cannot see through it. The cruelty here is not a side effect. It is the active ingredient. The pain is not what it costs to run the machine. The pain is the machine. And that is the line the show draws under everything we learned in the camouflage scene. A single Morty is a human shield. A wall of Mortys broken on purpose is a fortress. The same logic scaled up until it stops being uncomfortable and becomes monstrous. And the only thing separating the two is how many grandsons you are willing to spend. And the detail that should keep you up at night is how rational it all is. There is no madness in it. A genuinely insane Rick would be easier to file away. This Rick did not snap. He identified a threat, designed a countermeasure, and the countermeasure happened to require an industrial quantity of children in constant agony. Every step is sound. Every step follows from the one before it. The only place a normal person would have stopped, the place marked "Do not do this," is a place a Rick reads as a suggestion. The grid is not what happens when a Rick goes wrong. It is what happens when a Rick is allowed to be completely methodically right about a problem with nothing in the universe positioned to tell him no. And then the show does the most damning thing it could. It does not let Rick be the good guy who is shocked, because Rick looks at this wall of tortured children, this thing he is supposed to be appalled by, and what comes out of his mouth is recognition. I fiddled with a concept like this once. On paper, Morty, on paper. I wouldn't do this. It's barbaric overkill. Season 1, Episode 10. Sit with what he just confessed. His line in the sand, the thing that separates him from the monster who built this, is not that the idea is unthinkable. He thought it. He worked it out. He did the math on a matrix of suffering Mortys and found it sound enough to fill a page. His objection is one of taste. Barbaric overkill. Too much. Inefficient. He would not do this, not because it is evil, but because in his estimation you do not need this many. The difference between our Rick and the Rick who built the grid is a question of dosage. And this is why the show is so careful never to let our Rick be the hero of this scene. In almost any other story, the protagonist who stumbles onto the torture chamber is defined by his horror. His revulsion is the proof of his soul. The gap between him and the villain is the gap between a person who could never and a person who did. Rick and Morty closes that gap on purpose. It puts the words on paper in our Rick's own mouth, telling you the only meaningful daylight between the man you are watching and the man who broke 100 children to a wall is a margin note about practicality. Not conscience, not mercy, just an engineer's opinion that the design is heavier than the spec requires. That is the quietest, ugliest beat in the whole sequence, and the script just lets it pass. No score swelling to tell you how to feel, no Morty calling him out. Just a man admitting he once sketched the blueprint for the worst thing his grandson has ever seen, and filing the difference between himself and a torturer under personal preference. And this is the structural point the whole section has walked toward, so let me say it plainly. The grid is not the work of one uniquely broken Rick. It is the work of a Rick who simply did not stop at on paper. Every Rick, the show quietly insists, has this in him. The camouflage scene already told you why. The moment you accept that a single Morty is acceptable to use as a human shield, you have accepted the principle, and everything after is just arithmetic. One Morty to fool the bureaucrats, a wall of them to fool the Ricks. The killer did not discover a new kind of evil. He discovered a bigger number. And our Rick ran that same equation in his own notebook and put it down only because the figure offended his sense of efficiency. The Citadel did not need a monster to build the grid. It only needed a Rick who was slightly less squeamish about scale. But while Rick is busy grading the atrocity for elegance, somebody in that grid is not waiting to be rescued. Somebody strapped to that wall has heard enough, because our Morty gets in among them, and this kid, the one just told to his face that he is dumb human armor, whose whole identity got reduced to a canceling frequency 20 minutes ago, does the one thing no Rick in this civilization would ever do. He talks to the Mortys like they are people. He introduces himself. My name is Morty Smith from Earth Dimension C137. I know you're scared because I'm scared, but that's no reason to accept our fate. Season 1, Episode 10. And then he says, the thing that is in a city built on the opposite assumption, basically a revolution in one sentence. We're Mortys. We're not defined by our relationships to Rick. Our destiny is our own. Season 1, Episode 10. Put that next to everything we have learned. The entire Citadel runs on the premise that a Morty is defined completely by his relationship to a Rick. That is the whole function. That is what a Morty is for. And here is a 14-year-old strapped to a torture wall telling a room full of his own face that the premise is a lie. And the Mortys respond the way desperate people always respond to the first person who tells them they matter. They make him a messiah. This sounds like something the one true Morty might say. And then building, he is the one true Morty. Season 1, Episode 10, which is the show being very smart about something genuinely sad. These kids are so starved for meaning, so completely defined by Rick their whole short lives, that the instant one of them claims a destiny of his own, the rest do not hear appear. They hear a prophet. They cannot imagine being individually special, so they pour all of it onto one chosen Morty instead. Told their entire existence that they are interchangeable, the second they get a taste of mattering, they immediately rebuild the exact hierarchy they were raised inside, just with a Morty at the top for once. The first Morty to say they did not need a messiah was immediately appointed messiah. It is a real act of courage wrapped inside a sad little joke about how an underclass that has never been allowed to be individuals does not actually know how. They break free, they fight back, the rebellion works, but even their liberation reflexively rebuilds a hierarchy with one Morty on top, because being told you are interchangeable for your whole life does something to your ability to imagine anything else. Hold on to that instinct. The way a crowd of Mortys reaches for one anointed Morty to follow, it is going to matter enormously later. Meanwhile, the Rick who built the grid has caught our Rick and settles in for the villain speech because, of course he does. He is a Rick, and the speech is chilling specifically because it agrees with everything our Rick said in the council chamber. You see, Rick, you're not as clever as you think you are. I wanted you to find me. We're not so different, you and I. Season 1, Episode 10. Then he lays out his method, and it is pure Rick. I crunched the numbers. I created a spectrum of all the Ricks. I listed them out from most evil to least evil. Season 1, Episode 10. And he tells our Rick the thing meant to be the bottom of the well, the truth this whole section has built toward. We both know that if there's any truth in the universe, it's that Ricks don't care about Mortys. Season 1, Episode 10. He says it like a law of physics. The one fixed point in a chaotic multiverse. Whatever else changes, a Rick does not care about a Morty. And he is about to download our Rick's brain and kill him on the strength of that being unbreakable. I'm simply going to download the contents of your brain and then kill you. Season 1, Episode 10. And then it falls apart. Because the killer Rick is not actually in charge of anything. Our Rick, even cornered, sees something the villain cannot see about himself. My God, I've seen this technology before. This Rick was being controlled remotely, puppeteered by somebody else. Season 1, Episode 10. The smartest hunter in the building, the Rick clever enough to hide from all the other Ricks, the one delivering speeches about how Ricks do not care about Mortys, was a puppet the entire time. This is the receiver. And then the question that hangs the entire series, yeah, but where's the transmitter? Season 1, Episode 10, and notice the cruel symmetry. A Rick was hiding behind a wall of suffering Mortys, and a Morty, this whole time, was hiding behind a Rick. The exact same camouflage trick, the same logic of using one being to mask another, except the show flipped which one was the puppet and which one was pulling the strings. The thing the Citadel was sure it controlled was, in at least one case, controlling it right back. And the answer is the last shot of the episode, the quietest, most disturbing button the show had pulled to that point. The transmitter is a Morty, a single calm Morty sitting alone in Jerry's room back at the house, who has been running the whole thing from the bottom of the food chain. He keys his device one last time. Wubba-dubba-dub-dub. Then to a confused Jerry walking in. Oh, hey Jerry, what are you doing in my room, buddy? Season 1, Episode 10. This is the figure the fandom would eventually come to call Evil Morty. And I want to be precise because the show is precise here. The episode never gives him that name. It never shows you an eye patch. Those are things the community attached to him later, and the popular reading among fans, which you should take as fan consensus and not canon, is that this quiet kid in Jerry's room is the first appearance of the most important villain in the series. But strip all of that away and look at only what this episode shows you, a Morty. one of the underclass, one of the disposable, interchangeable, defined by Rick canceling devices we spent this whole section watching get tortured into a wall. And he just outthought a Rick. He took the smartest being in his universe and used him like a hand puppet, then vanished. And the show refused to explain him for years. And that refusal is deliberate. The writers could have given you a name, a motive, a backstory, a tidy box to file him in, and they gave you none of it. They gave you a quiet kid in a suburban bedroom saying hello to Jerry, then walked away and let you sit with the dread season after season. That is a loop planted on purpose and one of the boldest things the show ever does, because it trusts you to remember a Morty who got maybe 15 seconds of screen time and one nonsense catchphrase. The Citadel built an underclass of children to hide behind. And exactly one of them looked at the whole arrangement, understood it better than any Rick alive, and started pulling the strings from the inside. They were so busy fighting over which Rick was the realest that not one of them noticed the part of the system that had quietly decided to stop playing along. And that is what this section has really been about, underneath the camouflage and the grid and the cult of the one true Morty. The Citadel built its entire defense on the assumption that the Mortys would always be the safe part, the dumb part, the part that cancels out and asks no questions and goes back to playing video games when the danger passes. The whole civilization rests its weight on the children being exactly as harmless as they look. And the very first time we visit this place, the show shows you that the assumption is already wrong. There is a Morty out there who is not a leash and not a shield and not a prop. There is a Morty who is the smartest thing in the room, and the room is full of Ricks, and none of them can see it. But the Mortys were not the only threat the Citadel never saw coming, because while the Ricks were busy policing themselves, an entire galactic government on the outside had started counting them. The Citadel spent every ounce of its paranoia looking inward, hunting its own for a killer that turned out to be one of its slaves. And the whole time, the real danger was assembling somewhere it never thought to look. It was about to arrive in the form of a wedding invitation, and it would bring this entire place to its knees. Part 5, The Landlord. So, the wedding invitation arrives, and it does the one thing nothing inside the Citadel ever managed to do. It gets Rick out of the house in a suit, but before we follow him, I have to be honest about where we are going, because this is the one chapter where the Citadel does not show up at all. Not the council, not the carnival, not a single Rick in a galactic uniform. The city we toured for 4 sections sits completely off screen for this entire episode, and that is the point. The thing that eventually ends the Council of Ricks does not start inside the Citadel. It starts with the exact enemy the Citadel was built to hide from, and to watch it arrive, we have to leave the city behind for one night and go to a wedding. Remember the founding logic. A few thousand Ricks looked at a universe full of people who wanted them dead, and the biggest name on that list was the intergalactic government itself. The whole reason the Citadel exists, its entire architectural thesis, was to give Ricks somewhere to disappear from exactly one threat: the Galactic Federation. The Citadel is, at its core, a bunker. A very fancy bunker full of geniuses, but a bunker built to keep one specific landlord from ever finding the tenants. So when the Federation finally walks through a door at this wedding, understand what you are watching. The monster the bunker was built to survive, showing up at a party, on time, with a guest list. A civilization of geniuses built an entire city to dodge one phone call from the government. So keep the Citadel in the back of your mind for this whole section, sitting out there in the dark, certain it is safe, because everything that happens at this wedding is about to make it a lot less safe. The wedding is for Bird Person, Rick's oldest friend in the universe, and his bride, Tammy. And the person who accidentally tells you the real stakes of the night is Bird Person himself, because a drunk Bird Person is an honest Bird Person. He looks at Morty and decides against every instinct to explain who is actually in the room. The galactic government considers us terrorists. It's unwise of me to share these details, but I've become inebriated. Season 2, Episode 10. Then he tells Morty the detail that should make the back of your neck go cold, because it is the Federation and the Citadel's problem stated in one sentence, except nobody in the room knows it yet. The guest list at this wedding includes 17 of the Federation's most wanted. We have committed numerous atrocities in the name of freedom. Season 2, Episode 10. Sit with that number. 17 of the most wanted beings in the entire galactic government, all in one building, all dressed up, all in range. The Federation has spent who knows how long hunting these people across the stars, and tonight they are gift-wrapped in a single room. And Rick, the man whose whole civilization was built to never be in exactly this situation, is standing right in the middle of it, raising a glass. And notice what Bird Person is really confessing underneath the wanted poster talk. The people Rick calls friends are not a friend group. They are a resistance, a loose alliance of the galaxy's most hunted criminals, the kind the Federation does not arrest, the kind it hunts. The same Federation the Citadel was built to hide from. This is the single largest gathering of the bunker's enemies of its enemy the show ever puts in one place, and Rick walked into it without a wall of Mortys, without the Citadel's defenses, without anything except a suit and a glass of champagne. And here is where the episode does something genuinely strange, something it earned by spending 2 seasons showing you a man incapable of it. Rick gives a toast, and the toast is sincere. No joke buried in it, no escape hatch, no wubba-luba dub-dub. The man who told his own grandson that love is just brain chemistry stands up at his best friend's wedding and means it. To friendship, to love, and to my greatest adventure yet, opening myself up to others. Season 2, Episode 10. Hold on to that line because the whole tragedy of this section lives inside it. Opening myself up to others. This is the most vulnerable sentence Rick has said out loud in the entire series to this point. The smartest, hardest, most armored man in the multiverse, the one who weaponizes children to hide his own brainwave, is telling everyone that he has decided to let people in. He has lowered the wall on purpose for this, and he says it like a man who thinks he has finally figured out the one thing his genius never could. He thinks the bunker mentality was the mistake. He thinks the answer was connection all along. The smartest man alive picks the worst possible night to decide that walls are overrated, and the show lets him have it. For about 90 seconds, Rick is happy and open and surrounded by friends, and it is real. The Federation, the Citadel, the whole machinery of being hunted, all of it is somewhere far away. This is the high point. The warmest the character ever gets, which is precisely why it is about to cost him everything. Because the second he lowers his guard is the exact second the Federation has been waiting for, and it has been waiting in the room the entire time. Tammy, the bride, the sweet, slightly bland teenage girl Bird Person fell in love with, she turns to the room, drops the persona, and what is underneath ends the entire celebration in one breath. In a lot of ways, what I really am is a deep cover agent for the Galactic Federation, and you guys are a group of wanted criminals, and this entire building is, in a certain sense, surrounded. Season 2, Episode 10, Deep Cover. Take that word seriously because it tells you how long this trap has been closing. Tammy did not show up tonight as an agent. She built a relationship with Bird Person. She dated him, got engaged to him, walked all the way down the aisle, and let him put a ring on her, and the entire time, every tender moment of it, she was Federation. The wedding was not the day the trap sprang. The wedding was the trap. The Federation grew one of its agents inside the Resistance, slowly, over months, and used the single most trusting day of Bird Person's life as the net. The Federation's deep cover plan was patient enough to actually attend the rehearsal dinner. And then she says, the line that turns the warmest night of Rick's life into the cage, it always was. Everyone here is under arrest for crimes against the Federation. Season 2, Episode 10, there it is, the landlord at the door with the eviction notice. Federation agents flood the room, and the first thing they go for is the one object that matters most. Drop the portal gun, slide it to the center of the room. Season 2, Episode 10. And as it slides across the floor, an agent says the part that should make every Citadel Rick go cold. Somebody confiscate that and don't damage it. They'll want it at Season 2, Episode 10. They will want it. The Federation does not just want Rick. It wants the technology. It wants the portal gun, the one device that makes a Rick. And somewhere up the chain, there is a someone who has been waiting for one. And what happens next, I am going to tell you plainly and not dress up, because the show does not. In the firefight that follows, Tammy kills Bird Person. The bride shoots the groom, Rick's oldest friend in the universe, the man whose wedding he opened himself up at, dies on the floor of his own reception, killed by the woman he married. That is the beat. There is no joke here. There should not be. The show plays it flat and quiet and final, and we are going to do the same. Because here is what that death does to the man we just watched lower his guard. Remember the toast. Opening myself up to others. He said it 90 seconds ago and meant it, and the universe answered by killing his best friend in front of him for it. The lesson Rick takes is not subtle, and he says it through his teeth in the wreckage of the day. Bleep me for letting my guard down, which I will never do again. Season 2, Episode 10. That is the door slamming shut. Every cruel, armored, untrusting thing he does for the rest of the series traces back to a vow he makes, standing over a friend the Federation took from him on the day he decided to feel something. And the survivors run. They get out, but getting out is not getting away, because the Federation now has faces, names, a portal gun, and a reason. Rick says it as they flee, and it is the line that quietly seals the Citadel's fate from 1,000 light years away. Oh, these guys are looking for us now. Earth will be swarming with them. Season 2, Episode 10. The Federation is no longer a distant threat to hide from. It is awake, it is hunting, and it is about to be everywhere. The bunker the Citadel built itself to be has a clock on it now, and the clock just started. So the family is on the run, hunting for a planet to hide on, and this is where the episode turns the knife, because it does not end with Rick caught by the Federation in some grand action sequence. It ends with Rick caught by Jerry. Jerry, who has spent the entire run of the show being humiliated by Rick, makes a quiet phone call to the people now hunting them. This is Special Agent Gribbles. You have a tip about Rick Sanchez? Season 2, Episode 10. And on the other end is Morty's father, selling out his father-in-law to the galaxy's police. I know the whereabouts of Rick Sanchez, the wanted criminal. Season 2, Episode 10. He hands Rick to the Federation to save his own family from a man he has always hated. Now, I have to be precise here, because this moment gets remembered wrong all the time. Rick does not give a heroic surrender speech. He does not nobly turn himself in to save everyone. He is turned in by Jerry with a phone call, and then he chooses to let it happen. He flies the family back toward the trap knowing exactly what is waiting, and he walks into it. The popular version, the one a lot of people remember, is that Rick turned himself in on purpose, that it was all part of his plan, and that reading is not wrong exactly, but it comes from Beth, and she says it in the next episode, Season 3, Episode 1. Looking back on this, in this episode, on this night, all you get is a man who let himself be taken after his son-in-law sold him out. Hold that distinction. We will pay it off next section. And the last thing this episode does is put Rick in a Federation cell and give him a button so perfect it tells you the whole shape of the man in one word. A fellow inmate just making conversation asks the obvious question. Hey, what are you in for? And Rick answers, everything. Season 2, Episode 10. Read that again. Everything. Not a crime, not a list. Everything. It is a joke. And also the truest thing he could say, because no single charge fits a being who has done what Rick has done across how many timelines. The man who built a civilization to never be caught by the Federation is now sitting inside a Federation cell, charged with all of it, and the only honest plea is the whole of it. And step back and look at what just happened to the city we left off screen. The Citadel was built to keep the Federation from ever finding the Ricks. And now the Federation has one. It has a portal gun. It has Rick Sanchez of Dimension C-137 in a cell and a brain full of every secret the Citadel ever tried to hide. The bunker did exactly what it was designed to do for seasons, and then the door it was built to keep shut got opened by a wedding invitation and a bitter son-in-law. The city that spent its entire existence certain it answered to no one is about to learn that it has a landlord after all, and the landlord just took its most dangerous tenant into custody. But here is the thing about putting Rick Sanchez in a box. Everything is also a promise, because the Federation thinks it has captured the most dangerous man in the multiverse, and it is right. And that is precisely the mistake. They have brought the one being who can topple them inside their own walls, sat him down in front of their own machines, and handed him the time and the access to do it. Next section, Rick does not escape the Federation so much as delete it. He turns one number into another and brings the entire galactic government down from inside a single chair. And in the chaos of that collapse, the Citadel finally gets dragged onto the board, declared doomed, and we find out who actually finishes off the Council of Ricks. The landlord is about to lose the building, and the city is about to find out that the Federation was never the scariest thing that could happen to it. Part 6, the Council falls. So the landlord is at the door, and the city that thought the Federation was the scariest thing in its life is about to learn otherwise. And we get back inside the Citadel the same way we got in the first time. Two kids fall through a portal who never asked to be here, except this time it is not Rick and Morty. Rick is rotting in a Federation prison cell, which we will get to, because the way he gets out is the engine that drives this whole chapter. So with Grandpa gone, it is Summer and Morty who trip the portal gun and get yanked off the planet, and the second they land on that chrome floor, Summer has no idea what she is looking at. And you have to understand what this looks like through her eyes, because Summer is the audience surrogate. Morty has been here before. He has the trauma to prove it. But Summer walks into a city of millions of her grandfather cold with no warning, no idea this is even possible. It is the same shock the show gave us in Season 1, replayed through someone who finds it even more insane than we did. So Morty explains it, and his explanation is the cleanest one-line description of this city anyone gives in the whole show. It's the Citadel of Ricks. All the different Ricks from all the different realities got together to hide here from the government. That is Morty, Season 3, Episode 1, summing up 4 sections of lore in 2 sentences. A city of the same man hiding from the same enemy, and Summer, brand new to all of this, asks the one question that cracks the whole thing open. Summer gets a better orientation to the multiverse in 10 seconds than most viewers got in 2 seasons. And it is worth stopping on how casual the show is about putting them here, because it tells you how the city sees the Smith family. Nobody rolls out a red carpet. Nobody is shocked to see a Morty. These two get processed like luggage. Because in the Citadel, a Rick and a Morty are the most ordinary thing in the universe. Summer is the strange one, the unexpected variable, a granddaughter wandering through a city that was never built with her in mind. And that detail matters in a few minutes, when the Council tries to use her as leverage and discovers, the hard way, that they grabbed the wrong card off the table. For now, just hold the picture. 2 teenagers alone in the headquarters of every version of the man supposed to protect them, and every version is exactly the kind of person you would not trust with a kid. Here is the question. If every Rick in this place hates the government, if the entire reason this city exists is that all of them refuse to be ruled by anyone, then why would all of them hate our grandpa specifically? Summer asks it plainly. But if every Rick hates the government, why would they hate Grandpa? And Morty's answer is the thing this whole documentary has been circling since the cold open. Because Ricks hate themselves the most, and our Rick is the most himself. Sit with that, because it is the master key to the entire building. 1,000,000 versions of one man, and the one thing every version privately cannot stand is the man in the mirror. They built a whole government out of self-loathing and called it safety. And our Rick C137 is not hated because he is different. He is hated because he is the most concentrated dose of the exact thing they all are. The purest Rick in a city of Ricks who would give anything not to be Ricks. Remember the cold open. The one thing not a single one of them can stand is being reminded that none of them is the original. Morty just told you why. Then he goes further and says the bleakest version of it out loud. Because nobody's special to him, Summer, not even himself. Season 3, Episode 1. That is a teenager explaining his own grandfather to his sister, describing a man who has scaled his contempt so high that it has wrapped all the way back around to include the person holding it. The Citadel hates our Rick because our Rick is the proof of what they are, and the kid carrying his last name knows it. And this is the whole tragedy of the place in a single sentence, so it is worth slowing down on. Every Rick in that building got into this city by telling themselves they were the special one, the original, the genius the universe could not do without. That is the lie the whole Citadel runs on, and then they have to live in a tower full of 1,000,000 other men telling themselves the exact same lie, wearing their exact same face. So the self-hatred is not a side effect, it is the foundation. Each of them looks at every other Rick and sees living proof that they were never special at all, and the resentment turns inward and rots. Our Rick is just the one who stopped pretending. He is not better than them. He is them, with the comforting story stripped off, and that is unforgivable in a city built entirely out of comforting stories. Most families argue about politics at dinner, but this one explains nihilism in a parking lot. And here is why this little alley conversation is the load-bearing beam of the whole documentary. The opening promise was a city of millions of the same man who all hate each other, and the one wound none of them can stand is being reminded that none is the original. For 5 sections, we showed you that hatred from the outside, the galactic uniforms, the trial, the Morty carnival, the bunker. But we never quite said where the hatred comes from. Morty just did. It comes from the mirror. Every Rick is haunted by the same impossible fact that there is nothing special about being the smartest man in the universe when the universe is wallpapered with copies of you. So they hate the reminder, and the biggest reminder is the Rick who refuses to flinch from it. That is our Rick. He is not the original. He has told us he does not even think there is such a thing. He is just the one who looked the whole horror dead in the face and decided to stop caring. And a city of men who cannot stop caring, who built an entire government just to feel important again, find that intolerable. So when the council finally gets him in their grip, this is the grudge underneath the charges. It was never about the murders or the portal gun. It was about the fact that he is the only honest Rick in a city of liars, and honesty here reads as a threat. Now, the council gets its hands on these kids, and instead of helping, they do what every government in this story does. They put on a show. They have figured out who that Morty probably belongs to, and a hostage is a hostage. So they drag Summer and Morty into a courtroom and read the charges like it means something. Operating an unregistered portal GN, radicalizing a Summer, conspiring with a traitorous Rick. How do you plead? Radicalizing a Summer. That is the charge. And they assign Morty a defense attorney, another Morty, the single most depressing legal employee in the multiverse, because here is what the council actually thinks of the kid representing him. It's not fair. You have no rights, and he's not a lawyer. We just keep him here because he's fun. That is the council describing their own justice system. No rights, no real lawyer, the whole trial a bit they run because they find it entertaining. And think what that tells you about the city. Back in Section 3, when our Rick stood in this same chamber, the council at least pretended to care about evidence. They scanned his portal gun. They built a case. Now, a season later, they have dropped the act entirely. The trial is openly a toy. They keep a Morty around to play lawyer the way you would keep a goldfish, and they say so to his face in open court while he is technically defending a client. That is a government that has stopped bothering to look legitimate even to itself. And that wasn't even the part that got people angry. because while the kids are stuck in this kangaroo court, the council makes a bigger call off screen. They decide the loose Rick out in Federation prison is a threat to the city's secrets, and they vote to send a strike team to break in and finish him. They are going to assassinate their own, which would be a great plan if the man they were hunting hadn't already escaped his cell and started walking straight toward them. The council keeps a public defender on staff purely for comedy, which is the most honest courtroom in fiction. Quick word on how he got loose, because it is the move that makes all of this possible. The Federation had Rick strapped into a brain scanner, digging through his memories for the secret to his portal technology. So Rick fed them a fake. He served up a tearful origin story, let them sink into it, and used the connection to upload a virus and body swap himself into the insectoid interrogator on the other side of the glass. He walked out of his own interrogation wearing the guard who was supposed to break him full clearance while his original body sat in the chair playing dead. That is the level we are operating at. The smartest man in the universe does not break out of prison. He convinces the prison to hand him the keys and apologize. So Rick is loose inside the Citadel, and he finds the one room the architects should never have built. A guard, not realizing who he is talking to, proudly explains the most insane piece of engineering in the entire city. This area is for teleporting the entire Citadel to somewhere else using only buttons and dials. The whole city, relocated, with a control panel any one person can reach. And Rick, looking at the dumbest security flaw in the multiverse, says the only thing there is to say. Yeah, well, it's a bad idea to have it designed that way then, isn't it? And then he does exactly what you think. He uses the city's own self-destruct button against it. The Citadel's been teleported to Federation space. It's doomed. This has to be C-137, you guys. Read that again. The most paranoid civilization ever built. A city designed from the ground up to hide from one specific enemy gets picked up and dropped into that enemy's front yard by one of its own residents. The bunker just got delivered to the bomb. And the council knows immediately whose signature this is, because only one Rick on the central finite curve would be petty enough and smart enough to do it. Then comes the standoff, and the council tries to appeal to Rick's heart. You're a rogue, Rick, irrational, passionate. You love your grandkids. You came to rescue them. And Rick looks at the man selling him his own redemption arc and turns it down flat. I came to KLL you, bro. That's not even my original summer. Not even my original summer. He didn't come for love. He came for the kill. And the granddaughter is from a different timeline anyway. That is the man the Citadel is most afraid of, telling them exactly why they were right to be. And notice what just happened, because it is the cold center of the whole episode. The council cannot overpower Rick, so they try to do the thing the Citadel always does. They tell him a story about himself. You are passionate. You love your grandkids. You are the hero of your own rescue mission. They are offering him the one thing every other Rick in that building is desperate for, a flattering version of who he is, and he hands it straight back. He is not irrational. He is not here for love. That is not even the right summer. He refuses the comforting story to its face in the middle of a hostage standoff, while a fleet of warships materializes around the city he just doomed. This is the same wound from the alley conversation, now turned into a weapon. The Citadel runs on Rick's believing flattering lies about themselves. Our Rick will not hold the lie, even when his own grandkids are the bargaining chip. And that is what makes him the most dangerous man in a city of 1 million of him. They built a city to escape one enemy and a button to mail themselves to it. And here is the part that should sit a little uncomfortable, given everything we just said. Rick does rescue the kids. He pulls them out before the doom lands. So you could squint and call that love, the exact thing the council tried to flatter him with. But watch how he frames it and notice he never once admits to caring. The rescue is folded into the revenge. He came to kill the council. The grandkids were on the way. He will burn down a government and pull 2 teenagers out of the fire in the same motion and refuse to call either one the reason. That is the tension the show keeps alive with this character forever. Maybe he loves them. Maybe he is just incapable of saying so. The Citadel needed him to be one or the other, hero or monster, because those are the only two stories it knows how to tell about a Rick, and he refuses to be sorted. He just leaves with the kids and the wreckage behind him. And while the Citadel is busy being doomed, Rick pulls off the second half of the move, the one that ends the Federation that was menacing it. He does not bring an army, he changes a digit. But watch closely as Grandpa topples an empire by changing a 1 to a 0. That is the whole weapon. He gets into the Federation's economy and edits one number, and the entire galactic government collapses because its money stops being worth anything. Their own official says it out loud, dazed, watching it happen. I mean, our single centralized galactic currency just went from being worth 1 of itself to 0 of itself. An empire that spanned galaxies, undone by a man with administrator access and a grudge. And this matters enormously for the Citadel, so do not let it slide past as just a funny Rick flex. The whole reason the city has been under pressure, the whole reason the last section ended with a landlord at the door, is the Federation. That was the monster the bunker was built to survive, and Rick just deleted it. Not with a war, not with a fleet, with a 1 and a 0. So now both of the Citadel's bosses are wrecked in the same afternoon. The Federation is broke. The Citadel is sitting doomed in the wreckage. And for one strange moment, the city is technically free of the exact enemy it was designed around, which you would think is good news, except a city built entirely to oppose one thing tends not to know what to do with itself the second that thing is gone, which leaves the obvious question hanging. The council was the only thing running this city. So what actually happened to the council? Here's where I have to be straight with you, because this is the part everybody gets wrong. People will tell you Tammy gunned down the council, or the Federation wiped it out, or the Phoenix person did it. Watch the actual show, and none of that is what you get. The episode you just watched shows the Citadel teleported into Federation space, and a council member calling it doomed. But it never shows you the council's final breath. For that, you jump ahead one episode to Season 3, Episode 7, where a Rick goes door-to-door begging for donations to rebuild the Citadel and knocks on exactly the wrong door. It is one of those quiet places where the fan version and the actual show have drifted apart over the years. Go online and ask who killed the Council of Ricks, and you get a confident answer about Tammy, about the Federation, the wedding massacre, the Phoenix person rising out of the wreckage to take revenge. It is a great story. People have built whole video essays on it. The only problem is the show never says it. The show is much smaller and much bleaker. No army, no avenging monster, a guy on his doorstep, and when the fundraiser comes knocking, the Rick who answers brags about something the fundraiser did not expect. That's why I murdered everyone in charge and left it to rot. Season 3, Episode 7. One Rick, no army, no Tammy, no Federation. A single anonymous resident who hated the government so much that he walked in and killed everyone running it, then left the city to rot behind him. And in case you think there is more to it, his own Morty fills in the blank. They tried to murder him first. The council went to assassinate one of their own, and that one Rick got there first, which, if you have been paying attention, is the most Rick thing that could possibly happen. Remember, while Summer and Morty were stuck in that sham trial, the council voted to send a strike team to kill the loose Rick in prison. They did exactly that to some other Rick, or tried to, and it cost them everything. The government a million geniuses built to keep themselves safe was destroyed by the single behavior it could never stop doing, which was hunting its own. They reached out to murder a Rick, and that is the one thing in the universe guaranteed to get a Rick to murder you back. The fundraiser, still not getting it, tries to make small talk. The council's gone now. Yeah, he knows he's the reason. So the truth is colder than the fan version. The Council of Ricks, the government a million geniuses built to keep themselves safe, was not toppled by an outside monster. It was wiped out by one of the men it ruled for the exact crime of trying to rule him. There is a loose thread to tag here, too. quietly before we move on. In the silent stinger at the end of Season 3, Episode 1, a rebuilt bird person gets switched on as the Phoenix person. Hold on to him, but do not let anyone tell you he ended the council, because the show never says that. The show says one Rick did it with his own hands, so the headless city is now wide open. No council, no federation, no landlord left to fear, which means somebody is about to rebuild this place from scratch, and the single best look we ever get at what daily life inside the Citadel actually feels like is about to begin. Part 7. The Working City. So one Rick killed the government with his own hands and left the place to rot, and then the city did not die. Somebody scraped the bodies out, somebody passed the collection tin, somebody poured the concrete, and the Citadel came back. Not as a council, not as a clubhouse for a ruling class of Ricks, but as something stranger and far more familiar, a working city. A place where millions of ordinary Ricks and ordinary Mortys get up in the morning and go to a job. And this is where the show does the single boldest thing it ever does with this location. Because the episode that shows you all of it is built around a magic trick. The episode is called The Ricklantis Mix-Up. The title promises a Rick and Morty adventure in an underwater city, and the show gives you exactly 30 seconds of it. Our Rick and our Morty zipping off to find Atlantis, and then it does something almost no television does on purpose. It leaves them. It follows their portal back up into the Citadel and just stays there with the millions of nobodies for the entire rest of the hour. The heroes are off having the fun. We are not invited. We stay in the city with the working class, and by the time the episode is over, you will not even care what happened in Atlantis, because what happens in the city is the best the show ever got. You tune in for a buddy adventure, and the show benches its 2 stars to follow the janitors instead. And it is worth saying out loud what critics have said about this since 2017, framed as their reading and not as gospel. Outlets like Paste Magazine read the whole episode as a deliberate class allegory, a story about late capitalism dressed up in science fiction, a world where the most brilliant being in existence is still stuck plunging toilets and clocking in. Paste called it class struggle, getting a bold, dark Rick and Morty treatment. That is a critical interpretation, not something the show announces. But once you have heard it, you cannot unsee it, because the very first thing the city shows you is the factory floor. The wafer factory is the heart of the working city, and the first scene there is so ordinary, it is almost painful. A supervisor, Rick, is being promoted, and he gives the kind of going-away speech you have heard 100 times in 100 break rooms. I've been your supervisor for 5 years, but all shitty things must come to an end, and I have been promoted to regional manager. Regional manager. In a city of the smartest man who has ever lived, there is a corporate ladder, and a Rick is genuinely excited to climb one rung of it. Then he introduces the new boss, a Rick they call Cool Rick, who closes the meeting with the exact line every middle manager since the beginning of time has used to end a meeting. All right then, back to work, you gold Rickers. Back to work. That is the whole joke and the whole horror at once. These are not lesser men. Every one of them on that floor is the smartest being in their entire universe. A man who can build a portal gun in a garage and topple a galactic empire by editing a spreadsheet. And here they are on an assembly line, told to get back to work by a guy who just got a slightly better parking spot. The genius is not the point in this city, the labor is, and the candidate running for office across town, who we will get to in a big way, has already named the exact thing wrong with this picture. Here is his thesis, and it is the line that organizes this entire half of the story. I see it in our factories where Ricks work for a fraction of their boss's salary, even though they're identical and have the same IQ. Sit with how clean that is. 2 identical men with the exact same IQ, literally the same person atom for atom, just pulled from a different reality. One is the boss raking in the salary, and the other is on the line earning a fraction of it. There is no talent gap to justify the pay gap because there is no gap at all. The only difference between the Rick giving orders and the Rick taking them is which side of the rope they happen to land on. That is the engine of the whole working city, And once that Morty says it out loud, every background detail in the episode starts to look like evidence. Same brain, same face, same IQ, but somehow wildly different paychecks every single payday. Meanwhile, on the streets of that same city, the show runs a second story, and it is the one that hits hardest. A veteran cop, Rick, gets a new partner, and to his disgust, the new partner is not another Rick, but a Morty, a rookie Morty cop, idealistic, fresh out of the academy, who climbs into the car expecting a mentor and gets a cynic. Lesson 1, rookie, expect the unexpected. Now, get in. And from the second they pull out, the older one will not stop talking about Mortys like they are a problem to be managed rather than people he works alongside. The rookie wears the badge and does the work, but to his own partner, he is barely a colleague. Mortyists are raised to be sidekicks. Without a side to kick, they just start kicking. That is the worldview the cop Rick has built his whole career on. Mortys are not citizens. They are a containment issue. And the rookie, who is himself a Morty sitting right there in the uniform, finally pushes back in the quietest, saddest way possible. Look, I'm just saying it makes me a little sad to hear a Morty cop calling Mortys animals. He is not yelling. He is not making a speech. He is just a young person listening to his own boss describe his own kind as animals, gently saying out loud that it hurts to hear. This is the plot one essayist read specifically as a story about internalized prejudice. A Morty taught to look down on Mortys. That is one writer's interpretation, not the show spelling it out. But the show does not exactly hide the theme either because of how this partnership ends. The veteran gets stabbed, and on his way out, after a whole career of treating Mortys as disposable, he says the thing he spent the entire episode not believing. Nothing's wrong with putting your faith in a Morty, you just gotta pick the right one. The cynic dies a believer, and the rookie carries it forward, walks into the worst part of the city to arrest the Morty crime boss everyone told him to leave alone, repeating his dead partner's last lesson back to himself. You told me to put my faith in the right Morty. I've got faith in you, partner. Do the right thing. It is a genuinely hopeful beat in the bleakest episode the show ever made, and then the show undercuts it with the line that haunts the whole hour. Same old story, Rick's calling Mortys. That is the refrain underneath this entire civilization. Whoever is in charge, whoever wins the election, whoever runs the factory, it comes back to the same sentence. The Ricks are on top, and the Mortys are on the bottom, and the bodies pile up at the bottom. Hold on to that line because the city is about to elect somebody who heard it loud and clear. Quick thing while you have got a second, because we are about to walk into the darkest stretch of this whole story. If you have made it an hour deep into a documentary about a city of 1 million sad geniuses and you are still here, you are exactly the kind of person this channel is built for. Hit subscribe so the rest of the lore maps land in front of you when they drop. That's all. Now, back into the factory because we left somebody on that floor, and his story is the hardest one in the building. So the factory makes wafer cookies, and the commercial that sells those cookies is on the surface the most heartwarming thing in the episode. A gentle narrator introduces a Rick who is different from the others. He realized long ago that the greatest thing he'd ever create was his daughter, a Rick who chose love over genius, who would rather hold his baby girl than build a death ray. It plays like a greeting card. And then the commercial calmly tells you what they do with that feeling. They strapped him into a machine. They run the single happiest memory he has, the day his daughter was a baby, on a loop through his mind forever, and they harvest the brain chemical that contentment produces and bake it into the cookie. Come home to the impossible flavor of your own completion. Come home to simple Ricks. The most peaceful man in the city is a prisoner kept in a permanent dream of his own daughter so a corporation can bottle his joy and sell it by the box. There is no joke here. There is nothing funny about it, and the show knows there is nothing funny about it, so it lets the ad play sweet while the picture shows you the truth. A man's love for his child turned into a product on a loop against his will for the rest of his life. And down on the floor, Another worker, Rick, finally cracks. He takes the plant hostage, demands a portal gun, demands a way out, and he says the thing the whole working city is feeling. Don't you get it? They told us we were special because we were Ricks, but they stripped us of everything that made us unique. That is the wound of the entire Citadel in one sentence, screamed by a man at the end of his rope. They sold every Rick the same promise, that being a Rick made you special, then packed 1 million of those special men onto assembly lines where being a Rick means nothing at all. The owner of the place, a Rick who calls himself Rick D. Sanchez III, actually agrees with him and invokes the founding lie of the whole city. This citadel was founded by Ricks for Ricks to be free. Founded to be free. Now it bottles a man's love and sells it as a snack. A city founded so the smartest man alive could be free, and it turned him into a vending machine. And here is the coldest part, the turn that tells you exactly how this city treats a rebellion. The worker who screamed about being stripped of everything unique, the man who shattered the grand illusion on that factory floor, gets repackaged. The commercial comes back at the end, reworked, selling a new flavor built on his uprising. Come home to the unique flavor of shattering the grand illusion. Come home to Simple Rick. The man rebelled against the machine, and the machine ate the rebellion and printed it on the label. Even resistance in this city is just the next product. That is the working citadel in full. It does not crush you and move on. It crushes you and sells you back to yourself. There is one more corner of the city to see before the election, and it is the school. This is where the Mortys come from, or at least where they get sorted, and the teacher Rick runs his classroom like a shipping department. Tomorrow, you'll be transferred to your new Ricks. Hopefully, they will be your last. Transferred to your new Ricks. Hopefully, your last, because going through a lot of Ricks means you are the kind of Morty nobody keeps. These children are equipment assigned out to grandfathers like rental gear, and they know it. So a small group of them skips assignment day to go looking for something the other kids whisper about. A way out, a thing called the wishing portal. One of these kids is named Slick, and Slick is built sad on purpose, which the show states plainly. I'm part of an experimental line of Mortys with a drama implant. He was manufactured to feel everything too much. He carries a despair that was installed in him at the factory the same way the wafer Rick carries his loop, and he says the thing the whole underclass has been swallowing for the entire episode. Morty wishes never come true, not on the Citadel, and when the others ask why he even brought them to a wishing portal he does not believe in, he gives one of the quietest, heaviest lines in the show. I wish anything about this life would change. Not a wish for a toy, not a wish for a cooler necklace like the other kids, just a wish from a child engineered to suffer, that something, anything, would be different than this. I am going to handle what happens next plainly the way the show does, because it does not play it for a laugh, and neither will I. The wishing portal is not magic. It is a dump, a blender, a hole in the floor of the city that grinds up whatever falls in. And Slick, the boy built to feel too much, who wished only that something would change, goes in. The show does not linger, and it does not joke. It lets it land. And then, at the very end of the episode, the regime changes. The whole city gets a new leader. The school gets shut down. Everything is upended at once, and a surviving Morty looks at the wreckage of the old system and says, the line that turns Slick's death into the bleakest irony in the series, holy crap, Slick's wish came true. Everything about this life did change. The whole Citadel got turned over. Slick just did not live to see the one day his wish was granted, and it was granted by the very thing that is about to take over this entire city, which is the thread that pulls us out of the working city and into the centerpiece of the whole story, because all of this, the factory and the cops and the wafer machine and the school, is happening in the background of one big event. The new Democratic Citadel is holding its first ever presidential election, and the man rebuilding this city from the ashes of the council is going to be chosen by ballot. There is a candidate nobody is taking seriously, A Morty running for president in a city run by Ricks, treated by the news as a cute little long shot, the most adorable underdog in the race. The smart money says he cannot win. The smart money has not heard his speech yet, and the speech he is about to give, the one that takes him from novelty to landslide, is built out of every single thing we just watched. The factories, the streets, the schools. He saw all of it. He is about to name all of it on a debate stage in front of the whole city. And the reveal waiting on the other side of that victory is the thing this entire documentary has been walking toward. Part 8, the election. He saw all of it, the factories, the streets, the schools, and now he is backstage at a debate, about to name every piece of it in front of the entire city. But to understand why that speech detonates, you have to understand how little anyone thought of the man giving it. Because for most of this election, the Morty candidate is a joke. Not a threat, a joke. The novelty pick, the cute long shot, the most adorable thing in a race full of Ricks. The news covers him the way you cover a dog that learned to skateboard. A Morty running for president in a city where Mortys get assigned to grandfathers like office chairs. Nobody is scared of him. That is the whole point. That is the disguise. And the man closest to him does not believe in him either. His own campaign manager, another Morty, spends the run-up trying to talk his candidate down off the ledge, convinced this whole thing is about to blow up. The candidate keeps insisting he feels good. "I feel pretty confident about tonight's debate," he says, and the manager fires back, "You shouldn't, sir. You should be terrified." When the candidate floats the idea that maybe a campaign needs a little faith, the manager hits him with the most ironic line in the episode. "It's not faith you need, it's fear." He is begging his candidate to be afraid. He has no idea he is talking to the single most calculating person in the building. His own campaign manager thought he was a doomed underdog, which tells you exactly how good the disguise was. Then comes the debate. And the debate is where the race quietly ends because the opposition is a disaster. The candidate, Morty, is up against a Rick whose entire pitch is empty flattery, a man who opens the most important night of the campaign by sucking up to the audience. First off, can I just say that I believe this Citadel is the greatest in the entire multiverse? That is the rival's big swing. Tell the room it is the best room in all of infinity and hope nobody notices you said nothing. It is the hollow applause line you have heard from 1,000 real podiums, the political equivalent of a participation trophy. And it lands with a thud, because 6 feet away is a Morty about to do the exact opposite. He is not going to tell the city it is great. He is going to tell it the truth about itself out loud on camera, and the contrast is going to bury his opponent. So watch how this builds. This is the speech that turns a novelty act into a landslide, and it is constructed like a demolition. He starts wide, almost gentle, naming the real fault line running through the Citadel. The division I see is between the Ricks and Mortys that like the Citadel divided and the rest of us. That is the opening move. And it is brilliant because he does not divide the room into Ricks versus Mortys. He divides it into the people profiting from the misery and everyone drowning in it, which is almost everybody. He has just told a city of millions they are on the same side and that the enemy is small. Then he starts walking through the evidence, the exact same evidence we spent the last section watching, naming it piece by piece. I see it in our schools, where they teach Mortys we're all the same because they're threatened by what makes us unique. He just named the school. Every kid sorted and shipped and told they are interchangeable, said out loud on a stage. Then he keeps going, and the next one is darker. I see it in our streets where they give GNS to Mortys, so we're too busy fighting each other to fight real injustice. The streets, the cop arc, the same old story. Mortis killing Mortys, diagnosed in one sentence. Keep them armed, keep them scared, keep them aimed at each other so they never look up. And then he names the factory. I see it in our factories where Ricks work for a fraction of their boss's salary, even though they're identical and have the same IQ. There it is again, the line that anchored the whole working city, the same man on both sides of the paycheck. He has now walked the entire civilization in 3 sentences. School, street, factory, every cruelty we watched, named from a podium. And then he closes, and the close is where he stops describing the problem and points at the people causing it. The Citadel's problem isn't homeless Mortys or outraged Ricks. The Citadel's problem is the Ricks and Mortys feeding on the Citadel's death. He just told the city the underclass is not the disease. The disease is the small group of parasites at the top getting fat off the decay, and then he delivers the line that turns a speech into a movement. But I've got a message for them, from the Ricks and Mortys keeping it alive. You're outnumbered. Outnumbered. 2 words and the whole room understands them. A handful of them, millions of us, and he caps it with the line that is basically his campaign slogan, the warm, unifying promise underneath all of it. I see every Rick as my Rick. I hope they see me as their Morty. A Morty, the lowest thing in this city, standing up and offering to belong to all of them. It is genuinely moving. It is the best political speech in the entire show. And the most important thing about it, the thing you have to hold on to, is that every single word of it is true. He is not lying about the Citadel. The horror is that he means it, and it still does not make him the good guy. Every word of that speech is true, which is exactly why it works as the world's best disguise. Now, while all of this is happening, there is a smaller, grimmer story running in the shadows, and it is the part that should have warned everybody. Somebody tries to kill him, and the way the show handles it tells you everything about who this Morty really is. A would-be assassin gets close, and the candidate, recognizing him, just casually asks how he has been. Hey, did you end up getting a new job? And the assassin answers, flat as can be, yeah, I did, assassinating you. The candidate does not flinch. The attempt fails, and when the shooter is dragged off insisting he had to do it, that the man could not be allowed to win, he had to be stopped. He couldn't be allowed to win. A guard delivers the punchline that should have been a screaming red flag to the entire city. Then you should have worked on your aim, bro. Somebody was so certain this Morty was dangerous that they tried to put a bullet in him, and the city laughed it off and elected him anyway. Because elect him they did. The novelty act, the dog on the skateboard, wins, and not by a hair. When the disbelieving manager asks if he really won, the answer comes back cold and simple. Yeah, it was a blowout. The Morty nobody took seriously just took the entire Citadel, the whole city of 1 million Ricks, by ballot, fair and square, democratically. And that is exactly when the floor drops out real quick, because we are standing right on the edge of the single best reveal in this entire show, and I want you here for it. If a feature-length breakdown of a fictional city's class politics is somehow exactly your idea of a good time, then we are the same kind of broken, and you should hit subscribe so the rest of these lore maps find you. That's the whole ask. Now stay with me, because the man this city just elected is about to take off his mask, and the man underneath is the reason this documentary exists. So the new president gets a haircut. That is the scene. He has won the whole city, and the first thing that happens is a group of sharp-suited Ricks pull him into a back room to explain how things actually work around here. These are the Garment District Ricks, and they have a message for the man who just won the election. They run this place. They always have. We were saying President Morty, that we don't care who sits in that seat. A Rick, a Morty, a goddamn Jerry, it doesn't matter. Hear the contempt in that. They are telling the elected leader of the entire Citadel that his title is decoration, that the building has a real owner, and it is not him. And then they spell out exactly how permanent they think they are. We've been running the Citadel since before the council, and you'll find that we're still running it now. Before the council. They outlasted the Council of Ricks. They are the deep machine under every regime this city has ever had, confident this little Morty is just the next face they will manage. And the president, mid-haircut, does not argue. He just runs a quiet little test. He turns to the room and asks a simple question. Well, I think it's important to be clear. Raise your hand if he speaks for you. It is the calmest, most lethal thing he could have said because it exposes the bluff. The Garment District Ricks claim to run the city, but when the question is put to the room, only a few hands go up. They are not the millions. They are a clique that convinced itself it was the city, and the man in the barber chair just made them count themselves. Then the barber, finishing up, asks the most ordinary question in the world, and the answer turns it into the hinge of the entire series. Is that enough off the top? The barber asks, and the president answers with a question of his own. I don't know, is it? And as the chair turns, we see it. The haircut is done, and the man in the seat is wearing an eye patch. It is him. It was always him. The novelty candidate, the unifier, the Morty who saw every Rick as his Rick, is evil Morty. The same Morty who was pulling the strings back in the very first Citadel episode, the puppeteer in the shadows, 3 steps ahead of everyone since the beginning. He did not sneak into power. He did not stage a coup. He ran for office and won, and now he is sitting in the only chair that matters, taking off the disguise. This time, he didn't hack the system. He just ran for president and beat it at its own game. And then he tells you, almost playfully, exactly what is about to happen. He pours a drink and narrates his own villain moment out loud, the show winking at you one last time before it stops winking entirely. This seems like a good time for a drink and a cold calculated speech with sinister overtones. He is announcing the genre. And then he gives you the speech, except he strips it down to a list of single words, the bones of every political address ever given. A speech about politics, about order, brotherhood, power. The whole campaign, the whole movement, the whole beautiful speech about seeing every Rick as his Rick, distilled down to the one word it was always really about, power. And then he says the line that ends the talking and starts the body count. But speeches are for campaigning. Now is the time for action. What follows has no dialogue at all, and that is deliberate, so I am going to describe it the way the show shows it to you, plainly without making a joke out of it. The music comes up, a slow and aching piano piece, and the purge begins. One by one, the people who stood in his way are walked to the airlocks. The doors seal. The void takes them. There are no last words, no monologue, no negotiation. Evil Morty simply removes everyone who could threaten him, methodically, silently, while the saddest song in the building plays over the top of it. The man who promised to see every Rick as his Rick is jettisoning Ricks into space, and the camera does not flinch, and it does not editorialize. It just watches the doors open and close. And here is where the show's craft becomes part of the story, framed as production fact and not canon. That piece of music is real, and its history is almost as strange as the scene it scores. It is called For the Damaged Coda by a band named Blonde Redhead, and it came out back in the year 2000, 17 years before this episode aired. A quiet, haunting little song that almost nobody outside the band's fans knew. And then this scene happened. The episode aired in 2017, and the song that had been sitting in obscurity for 17 years suddenly charted, landing at number 15 on Billboard's Hot Rock and Alternative chart. It became a full-blown internet meme. The sound people slap onto footage of their own worst, saddest, most defeated moments. A 2-decade-old song about damage pulled out of nowhere by a cartoon villain's quiet massacre and turned into the unofficial anthem of getting wrecked by life. That is how hard this scene hit people. A forgotten 2000s art rock song charted on Billboard 17 years late because of a cartoon airlock montage. And this is the moment to say plainly what this scene is, because critics and fans have been arguing about it ever since, and both sides are worth hearing. To one camp, this is the show finally giving us its true villain. He lied to an entire city, weaponized their real suffering for his own climb, and then murdered his way to total control the second the votes were counted. By that reading, the airlock montage is the mask coming off a monster. But there is a loud, sourced counter-reading, popular enough that outlets like CBR have mapped it out, that says something more uncomfortable. that Evil Morty is the only character in this city who read the system correctly. Every word of his speech was true. The Citadel really does grind Mortys into furniture, really does keep them armed and scared and disposable. By this reading, he is not evil so much as the one Morty who refused to keep forgiving the machine, the only sane man in a building full of people pretending the cruelty is normal. That debate, villain, or the only one who saw clearly, is genuinely unsettled. The show does not resolve it for you, and neither will I. What is not up for debate is the result. The puppeteer from the shadows of the very first episode now sits at the top of the whole civilization, elected and unchallenged, with everyone who might have stopped him floating somewhere in the cold. He took a city of 1,000,000 of the smartest men in the universe and beat all of them with a ballot and a haircut. But who is he actually? Where did this Morty come from? The one who would not be broken, the one who looked at the entire structure and decided to own it? That answer does not come for 2 more years of the show, and when it finally arrives in an episode called Rick Murray Jack, it does not just explain Evil Morty. It explains the wall built around infinity itself, the thing keeping every Rick and every Morty trapped in the only reality where Rick gets to be God. And this president, the one standing at that window, is about to tear it down. Part 9. The Wall Comes Down. So for years, that window shot is where the story sits. The eye patch Morty owns the Citadel, and the show lets it hang there unexplained, a loaded gun on the mantle. Then it comes back. Years later, our Rick mentions it the way you would mention a road closure. There's a Morty president now. That is the whole update. A Morty runs the city of 1,000,000 Ricks, and Rick C137 says it like the least interesting thing that happened that week. But it is not a road closure. It is the puppeteer from the very first episode, the kid pulling strings out of Jerry's room before anyone knew his name, and he has spent the gap sitting on top of the whole civilization. And he wants Rick at his table. A Citadel official shows up with an invitation you do not say no to. President Morty requests you join him for dinner. Dinner. The most powerful Morty in existence, who clawed up through a city designed to chew Mortys into furniture, wants to sit across from the one Rick who has been running from this place since it arrested him at breakfast. And to land what this Morty pulled off, our Morty says it plain. The guy got elected president by Rick's and Morty's. Elected. He convinced a city full of the smartest men in the universe to hand him the keys on purpose with a vote. That is the resume of the man waiting at the table. A Morty got a city of 1,000,000 geniuses to vote him into office. And Rick knows. He has known for a while, and this is where the loop from the first Citadel episode finally snaps shut. Remember the puppeteer, the receiver and transmitter, the Morty pulling strings from the shadows that nobody could trace? Rick connects it out loud, looking right at the eye patch. I only know one man that ever hacked my portal GN, and it turned out it was Evil You. There it is, the thing we planted back in the council episode, the mystery of who was behind the puppet Rick. It was him. The president at this table and the puppeteer from the shadows are the same Morty, and Rick just said it to his face. Now pay attention, because this is the closest the show comes to telling you where Evil Morty actually comes from, and it is not what fans spent years guessing. People wanted a single moment, one trauma, one cruel original Rick, one breaking point that turned a sweet kid into a monster. That is not the answer. The answer is colder and bigger, because it is not about one Morty at all. It is about the whole system. He starts with the thing we have been circling all documentary, the reason every Rick drags a grandkid around. You already know Rogue Ricks used Mortys to hide themselves from the Citadel, but you might not know it works so well that the Citadel became its own Morty market. A Morty market. The camouflage works so well, the city started farming it, breeding it, selling it. Kids mass-produced and traded because they make a Rick invisible. And then he says, the line that steps on the whole legend of Rick. Everyone in this show treats Rick like he is infinite, an endless supply of unique, brilliant grandfathers across the multiverse. Evil Morty pops that balloon completely. There aren't infinite versions of our grandfather Morty. He's an infinite smear of one shitty old man. An infinite smear of one shitty old man. Not 1,000 brilliant Ricks, one, smeared across infinity. The same weakness and wreckage copied 1 billion times, each copy pretending it is special. Then he explains what that means for the kids strapped to all of them. And he's attached to us infinitely through his weakness and our forgiveness. His weakness and our forgiveness. That is the leash. Rick fails. The Morty forgives him. The cycle locks back in place forever in every universe at once. And here is the part that should make your skin crawl, because he turns it on our Morty directly. The forgiveness is not a choice. It is engineering. This is why we're with him. This is why we're alive. Mortys exist to forgive Rick. That is the function. That is the product. And our Morty is no exception. You sell out Mortys, KLL me. I'd hate you more than the Ricks you worship if there was any point. But you can't help it. You were bred for it. He is telling our Morty to his face that his loyalty, his love, the thing that makes him a good kid, is a factory setting. And then he twists it one notch tighter, almost gentle about it. Geez, you guys really are bred for forgiveness? His villain origin is basically that he read the terms and conditions nobody else did. And worth saying here, framed as reception and not canon, is that this is the episode where the show finally cashed in years of buildup, and the reaction was loud but not unanimous. Rick Murray Jack is widely called the strongest hour of its season by a wide margin, praised for exactly this: the origin, the curve, the Citadel payoff landing at once. But a real minority strand of fans and reviewers pushed back on this stretch specifically, arguing the reveals come too fast and over-explain a mystery that worked better as a mystery, that a story which spent years being patient suddenly rushes to spell everything out in one dinner conversation. You can feel the seam they point at. The earlier Citadel episode let you live inside the world for an hour. This one stops and lectures. Both things are true at once, and the lecture is still one of the best monologues the show ever wrote. And this is where the show does the thing it does best, where it stops being a villain monologue and turns the knife on the audience. Evil Morty defines what makes him evil, and the definition is devastatingly small. He is not evil because he kills. He is not evil because he plots. He tells our Morty the actual reason, and it is almost nothing. That's what makes me evil. Being sick of him. If you've ever been sick of him, you've been evil too. That is the whole sin. Being sick of Rick, not hating him, not hurting him, just being tired of forgiving the same man for the same failures across an infinity of lifetimes. And the moment he says it, it stops being about cartoons, because everybody watching knows that feeling. Everybody has someone they keep forgiving, and everybody has hit the wall where they are just done. He is telling you the wall is the line. Cross it, and by this city's definition, you are evil too. And then he says the line that turns the character's title into a verdict on the entire species. There you go, kid. Now you're evil Morty too. Sooner or later we all are on this side of the curve. Now you are evil Morty too. It is not a name, it is a stage. It is what every Morty becomes the second they get sick enough of forgiving. And that phrase at the end on this side of the curve is the show quietly setting up the explosion, because he has just told you the cage has a wall, and the wall is called the curve. That word has floated in this story since the first council scene, since a Rick called our Rick the malcontent of the central finite curve, and never explained it. He is about to. Hold on for 15 seconds, because we have reached the single most important sentence in this documentary, the payoff to a mystery. The show planted in its 10th episode ever and refused to explain for years. If you have followed this whole insane history of a city built by 1 million of the same man, you already know you are the right kind of person for this channel. So do the thing and subscribe, because the next reveal is the one everything else was built to set up. All right, he hacks Rick's brain for the schematics he needs. The table talk turns into a fight. And on the way out, our Morty finally asks the question the show has dodged since season 1. What is the central finite curve? So our Morty asks it straight in the middle of running for his life. What is the central finite curve? And Rick, busy not dying, waves him off. Q&A after our survival. But Rick already knows what evil Morty is about to do with it, and he is scared of it, which tells you how big it is. If he's going to use it to blow the curve, we do not want to be here. Blow the curve. You can hear in Rick's voice that whatever the curve is, breaking it is the kind of thing you flee from. And then, because the show wants evil Morty to be the one who explains the cage he is escaping, the eye patch Morty turns and gives our Morty the definition. The real one. The one we have waited the entire documentary for. Do you know what the central finite curve is? Our Morty is asked. And the answer is 6 words that reframe the entire series. They built a wall around infinity. A wall around infinity. Sit with how insane that sentence is. Infinity, by definition, is everything, no edges. And the Ricks built a fence around part of it. Then he tells you which part. They separated all the infinite universes from all the infinite universes, where he's the smartest man in the universe. That is the whole con. There are infinite universes where Rick is not the smartest, where he is a nobody, where he never mattered at all. And the Ricks walled every one of those off. They kept only the slice where Rick is the genius, the god, the man with the answers, and locked the door. Every Rick, every Morty, the entire Citadel, all of it has been living inside a curated little pocket of reality, handpicked so Rick is always on top, and then he gives you the image that makes it personal and cruel and perfect. Every version of us has spent every version of all of our lives in one infinite crib built around an infinite bleep baby. A crib built around a baby. He is calling the entire walled-off reality a nursery, and the baby in the middle is Rick. The whole curve exists for one reason: to keep one insecure old man surrounded by realities where he is always the most important thing alive, so he never has to face a universe that does not need him. Every Rick is a baby in a crib. Every Morty is trapped in there with him. And think about the word that has haunted this whole story. The one a council Rick threw at our Rick in his very first scene. The malcontent of the central finite curve. The council said it like a sentence and moved on. It took the show until now, and it took the villain to explain that the curve was never a place on a map. It was the bars of the crib, and the eye patch Morty looks at all of it, the wall, the crib, the infinite smear, and says the 4 words that end the Citadel, and I'm leaving it. They spent infinity building a panic room, so Rick never meets a smarter guy. So that is the plan, and it is monstrous in its simplicity. To break the wall around infinity, he needs the Citadel's dimensional drive, and to make sure nobody follows him out, he locks the doors. A loudspeaker voice goes out across the whole city, calm as anything. Nobody leave, everybody stay. And then Rick realizes the scale of it. He hacked the entire city's portal supply. Every portal. Every Rick's only way out. Gone. A city built so the smartest men in the universe could always run from anything, and he just took away running. 1 million Ricks trapped in their own panic room. While he uses their own machine to punch a hole in the wall they spent infinity building. And the show, even with the apocalypse cycling up, cannot resist one last gag about how rotten this place always was. As the panic spreads, a sponsored loudspeaker, Morty, signs off on the whole civilization with the most cynical message imaginable. In uncertain times like these, I think it's important for me to say, eat sh-t bleep you. The drug companies paid for me to say every word. The drug companies paid for it. Even the last words this city ever hears are an ad. A society of infinite geniuses falling apart in real time, and the final broadcast is a sponsored insult. That is the Citadel telling on itself one more time before the lights go out, and here is the part that decides how you feel about him forever. Because right at the end, with the city dying behind him and the hole in infinity opening in front, he is not even cruel about it. He just makes an offer. You can come if you want, don't blame me if you don't. Come or stay, your call, no pressure. It is almost kind. And then, because the show will not let him be a clean hero, he undercuts it with the pettiest, funniest possible admission. It's just as well, I lied. That second seat's a toilet. There was never a second seat. He was bluffing the whole time. And Rick, of all people, is the one who appreciates it because it is exactly the kind of move he would pull. Oh, super DCK move, but weirdly kind of cool to admit it. That is, Rick paying respect to the Morty who beat him, the man who built a city to never be alone, tipping his hat to the kid about to leave the whole thing in ashes. And then he does it. He drives the Citadel's own machine straight through the wall the Ricks built and walks out of the only reality where Rick is God into the infinite reality where Rick is just a guy. The kid who was bred to forgive, who was sold in a Morty market, who got called furniture and a sidekick and a prop for an entire civilization, looked at the wall around infinity, found the one door, and took it. He did not win the game. He refused to play it. And the Citadel, the city built by 1,000,000 of the smartest men in the universe, the place that arrested Rick at his own breakfast table, gets left behind as collateral, breaking apart in the wake of one underclass kid walking out. Rick watches it go and gives the place the only eulogy it earns. Say goodbye to the Citadel, fellas. So that is it. That is the end of the place. A city dreamed up so one lonely man would never have to be the smaller genius in the room, undone by the one being inside it who read the whole design and refused to stay. But a city that big does not vanish quietly. There were millions in there. There was a president who is now loose in real infinity. There were survivors and wreckage and a whole multiverse that has to reckon with the fact that the wall is down and the baby is awake. What did the Citadel actually mean in the end? What was left after the lights went out? And what is the final word on the man who built a city to never be alone and the kid who walked out of it? That is where this story lands. Part 10, what it meant. So let me answer the question we left hanging. What was actually left after the lights went out? The honest answer, the one the show gives us, is smaller and sadder than you would think. The Citadel as a place is gone. Evil Morty hacked the entire city's portal supply so nobody could follow him, used the Citadel's own dimensional drive to punch a hole in the wall around infinity, and walked through it. The city broke apart in his wake. Say goodbye to the Citadel, fellas. That is the last word the place gets. Not a war, not a siege. One kid took the one machine that could break the wall, used it, and let the rest fall. And I want to be careful because people love to overtell this ending. The clean version is that the Citadel is rubble and everyone in it is dust, and that is not quite what we are shown. What we are shown is the curve broken, the city destroyed in his wake, and the one Morty who planned all of it gone, out beyond the wall. The millions inside, the wage Ricks on the rigs, the cop Mortys, the kids in the school, the president's own city that voted for him. The show lets all of it fall into the dark and does not stop to count. The Citadel was never really a building. It was an idea about how to live forever as the smartest man in the room. And the idea is what broke. One more thing, and I am putting it in as the people who make the show talking, not as canon. The Citadel never really left the writers alone. Outlets that cover the show have noted the creators kept returning to this setting season after season, and co-showrunner Scott Marder told Forbes that coming back to the Citadel brought out a lot of life and all the human shrapnel that came with it. Human shrapnel. That is a writer describing a place that destroys the people inside it and keeps generating more story. A city this broken is, weirdly, one of the richest things they ever built. A city held together by mutual hatred turned out to be great content. So now we land the whole thing. Every rig and factory and ballot and crib in this video comes down to one idea, and I want to say it as plainly as I can. The Citadel was 1,000,000 answers to one lonely question. The question is the one this man has been running from his whole life. What do you do if you are the smartest thing in the universe, if nothing can match you, if no one can reach you, except be alone? And the Citadel was Rick's answer. Build a city. Fill it with the only being you respect, which is yourself. Make sure that wherever you look, there is another you, so that for once, you are not the only one of your kind in the room. Sit with how lonely that is. A man who hated everyone, including himself, built a civilization so he would never have to be the only one. That is not a villain's plan. That is the loneliest thing a person can do. And it could not work. Every citizen believed the exact same thing our Rick believes, that he is the smartest thing alive. You cannot build a society out of 1,000,000 men who each think they are the most important person in it. Everyone is the king. Nobody is the subject, and so they built a bottom. That is the part that should never leave you. A civilization of geniuses, every one of them the smartest man in the universe, still could not function without an underclass. And the underclass they chose was children. They took the grandkids, the Mortys, and made them the floor the whole city stands on. Camouflage, then product, then a permanent servant caste with its own slums and schools that exist to teach a kid he is not special. The smartest beings in all of infinity looked at the problem of needing someone to be lesser, and their answer was to do it to children. The cruelty was not a glitch. The cruelty was load-bearing. The whole thing stood on it, and not one of those geniuses ever questioned it, because questioning it would have meant looking at a child and seeing a person, and a city of men who think they are gods cannot afford that. The moment a Morty is a person, the whole arrangement falls apart. So they simply decided he was not one. And here is the cruelest twist. In a city of 1,000,000 of the smartest men who ever lived, the only being who read the structure correctly was the one they treated as furniture. Every Rick can do the math. Not one of them could see the thing a Morty saw, because seeing it meant admitting they were the problem. It took the kid at the bottom, the prop, the human shield, the one they bred to forgive, to look at the entire design, the wall, the crib, the infinite smear of one old man, and understand it for what it was. He just looked at the cage from inside it, which is the one place none of them would ever stand. And then he did the thing none of them could imagine. He did not beat them. That is the part everyone gets wrong. He did not out-genius the city in a fight. He just refused the game. He looked at the only reality where Rick is God, the walled-off pocket where the smartest man always sits on top, and decided he did not want to live in it, so he found the one door and walked out. You cannot beat a man at being the smartest in the room if you leave the room. The whole civilization was built to make sure Rick always won, and Evil Morty won by deciding the prize was worthless. He walked out of the only reality where Rick is God, into the infinite reality where Rick is just some guy. You cannot lose the game if you are the only one who quit playing. And this is where it loops back to the very first thing we said. Remember the one wound none of these men could stand? The thing they would do anything not to be reminded of. That none of them is the original, a whole city of the same man, all of them quietly terrified that they are just a copy, that somewhere out there is a realer version, that they do not matter. They built infinity itself into a panic room to avoid that feeling, and the kid who walked out never wanted to be a Rick at all. He never wanted to be the original, never wanted to be the smartest man in the universe. That was their sickness, not his. He just wanted out. The one being in the entire story who was free of the thing that defined all of them is the one being they spent the whole time calling lesser. That is why he is the only one who got to leave. Once you see it that way, the whole structure clicks into place. Every Rick was chained to the same need to be the smartest, the realest, the one that mattered. They built a wall around infinity to protect that need. They bred children to feed it. They turned on each other the second any of them got too close to the top. The entire civilization was a single insecurity with 1,000,000 bodies. And the one being who was not built around that insecurity was the one being they could not hold. You cannot imprison someone with a wall built to protect a thing they never wanted. The cage only works on people who are afraid of being ordinary. Evil Morty was not. So the cage was never really closed on him. So that leaves the question this whole story has been daring you to ask, and I am going to leave it genuinely open because the show does, and the fans never settled it either. Was Evil Morty the villain of this story, or the only sane man in the building? This is the real fan debate, not me inventing a controversy. People who love this show are genuinely split. One whole camp reads him as sympathetic, almost a hero, a kid whose violence is just a rational response to a city that bred children as servants and called it normal. By that read, he is the only one who saw the abuse clearly, and the only one with the spine to end it. Critics have made exactly this case, that he is not a monster, he is the correct answer to a monstrous system. But the show will not let you off that easy. The other camp points at the body count. This is a guy who won an election by lying to a city, then airlocked his opponents into space the second the votes were counted. He left millions to die when he broke the curve. He admitted to a Morty's face that the kid was bred for forgiveness and then used that against him. You can completely understand why he did everything he did and still flinch at what it cost. He might be the only one who read the cage correctly, and he might also be the most ruthless thing the cage ever produced. The show puts both in front of you and refuses to pick, so I am going to do the same. I do not think there is a clean answer, and the not having one is the point. The story is not interested in telling you who to root for. It is interested in making you notice that you are not sure. The scariest part is how reasonable he sounds right up until the airlock opens. And maybe that is the most honest thing this story does. It builds a city so cruel that the kid who burns it down has a point, then makes that kid cruel enough that you cannot fully cheer. There is no version of this where everyone walks away clean. The Ricks built a machine that turned children into furniture, and the child who finally said no did it by stepping over a lot of other children to get out the door. You are allowed to hold both of those at once. I think the show is daring you to. So here is where it lands. We started with an impossible city, a place built by millions of the same man, everyone sharing his face, his genius, his contempt, and everyone unable to stand being reminded that none of them is the original, and we end at a hole in the wall around infinity with one small figure stepping through it. Except now you know what that picture is. It is not a villain escaping. It is the one person in the whole story who was never trying to be the original, walking out of the one reality built to convince a million copies that they were. The Citadel was a lonely man's answer to a question he could not survive asking alone. It failed because it was a million answers all at war, each one certain it was the right one. The only being who solved it by leaving. And the multiverse he walked into is the one the Ricks spent forever hiding from, where their man is not God, just a guy. The wall is down. The baby is awake. And somewhere out there in the real infinity, for the first time, there is a Morty who is nobody's furniture. That is the entire story of the Citadel of Ricks, a city of a million geniuses undone by the one kid they treated as a prop, who looked at the smartest civilization in existence and decided the smartest thing he could do was leave. If you want the rest of the multiverse mapped exactly like this, every piece of lore walked from the first frame to the last, then subscribe, because this is the only channel that takes it this seriously. And before you go, settle the thing the show never would. Drop it in the comments. Was Evil Morty the villain of this story? Or was he the only one who was right? I have read the whole thing twice, and I still cannot call it. Maybe you can.